Chapter 1078. After Zhang Yan released the demon-slaying divine lightning, the turbid fog in front of him had already been swept away. However, just now, he saw that in the distance, a dense number of heavenly demon avatars flew out, rushing out from the left and right, and they flew in an orderly manner. It didn't look like they were trying to escape, but were trying to outflank him from both sides. His gaze swept back and forth. These heavenly demon avatars flew very quickly, and they also had the phase reversal technique. If he used the 5 elements true light to sweep them, they would most likely be dodged. It was better to use the Qinghong sword to kill them. Thus, wherever his divine will passed, the sword aura trembled, and suddenly changed, killing towards where they were. If one counted carefully, one would find that the sword aura released this time was exactly the right number. Every ray of sword aura was aimed at a demon, neither one more nor one less. However, Sima Quan's current actions were completely different from just now. Facing the sword aura that was charging towards him, not only did he not escape, but he even took the initiative to charge forward and fight with them. After that, the avatars all spat out black smoke, which wrapped around their bodies, as if they were trying to taint the sword aura. Every time a sword aura slashed down, if they couldn't dodge in time, they would either escape invisibly or use the phase reversal technique to separate and combine. Looking at their posture, it seemed that they were no longer holding back and were prepared to fight with their lives on the line. Zhang Yan calmly raised his hand and pointed. Immediately, dozens of sword auras used the sword heart trueness technique. In an instant, the area within a radius of thousands of miles was illuminated by a magnificent and clear light. He originally wanted to break through Sima Quan's formless transformation, but when he looked at it, he was surprised to find that he was actually unable to force it out like just now. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows slightly. With such an outcome, there was only one possibility. The power of the opponent's divine ability was currently above his. However, if Sima Quan really had this ability, he would have used it just now when he was escaping. He wouldn't have waited until now. Then the result was obvious. He must have used some kind of method to increase his ability in a short period of time. His guess was indeed correct. The reason why Sima Quan was able to have such power now was because of the jade scroll that he broke just now. This item was also a fortuitous encounter that he had obtained in the void. There were many incomplete divine abilities recorded on it, and it just so happened that he could use them. What's more, this black jade slip was a magic treasure. As long as the power contained in it was activated, it could greatly increase the magic power of the person using it for a few hours. The only flaw was that it had been stagnant outside the void for too long, and was too heavily corroded by the poisonous fire and strong wind. Once the energy stored within was gone, it would immediately break, unable to be used again. Zhang Yan smiled. As the Qinsong School's Hall Master Duzhen, he didn't only have mana and supernatural powers to suppress people. He flicked his sleeve and took out a beast foot lamp. But he saw that in mid-air, in the flickering flames, a graceful woman was singing and dancing, and then a mass of dim yellow light shrouded down. In that instant, all of the devils, regardless of whether they were tangible or intangible, were instantly immobilized. He waved his hand again. Thousands of sword lights shook at the same time, and then rushed towards their respective targets. Sima Quan couldn't help but turn pale with fright. These devil clones were all formed from his devil chi. It could be said that losing one meant losing a portion of his magic power. How would he dare to be hit head-on? But at that moment, all of the clones couldn't move. Even if he used the phase reversal technique, it was useless. He suddenly shouted, and a pitch-black mirror flew out into the sky. With just a flash, it sucked in countless clones. But even so, close to 1/3 of the clones were killed on the spot. The pair of sunglasses shook. It turned into a ray of light and rushed towards Zhang Yan. Sima Quan was helpless. He originally wanted to use the clones to fight and secretly find a chance to get close to Zhang Yan. Then, with the help of the sunglasses, he would find a way to attack his soul. But who would have thought that Zhang Yan actually had a real treasure on him and could actually immobilize the spiritual opportunity on his body? Under such circumstances, he had no choice but to act prematurely. At that moment, the thousands of sword lights in the sky suddenly combined and turned into a ray of light. It was as fast as lightning, and in the blink of an eye, it caught up to the sunglasses. The light ray shot out, and in an instant, a crack appeared on the sunglasses. At this point, Sima Quan had no way out. Therefore, he completely ignored the pursuing sword lights and only focused on rushing forward. In just a short moment, the sunglasses had been hit several times. Even though it was originally a treasure, it couldn't withstand the slashes of the killing true treasure and finally broke. When the mirror broke, Sima Quan instantly fell out. But the moment he appeared, he fell into the beast light ray, and his body was once again unable to move. But now that he was not far from Zhang Yan, he shouted and took out a ray of white light and shot it towards the center of Zhang Yan's eyebrows. This Swadalian had a trace of his consciousness hidden in it. As long as it rushed into the opponent's consciousness, he could enter and fight with the opponent's soul. In such a battle, he believed that he was absolutely invincible. Zhang Yan squinted his eyes. After seeing the battle between martial sage Wu and Sima Quan, it was not difficult for him to guess what the opponent was thinking. Back then, with the help of the demons subduing slip, he killed a trace of martial sage Tai Heng's remnant soul in his consciousness. But that was because he had no other choice. Now that his opponent was a sky demon, who was an expert in the battle of souls, the two of them could not be mentioned in the same breath. At this moment, since he could suppress the opponent in a head-on battle, he would definitely not give up his advantages and take advantage of the weakness and let the opponent enter his consciousness. He stood still, and suddenly a ray of golden light climbed up behind him, and with a single slash, it cut Swadalian in half. Sima Quan's body couldn't help but tremble when his clone was destroyed. At the same time, the sword lights behind him rushed forward and turned into dozens of threads and quickly circled around his body. He immediately became motionless. A moment later, his body exploded into black smoke that filled the sky with a bang. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and suddenly, a bright crystal light flew out from between his eyebrows. It circled around the battlefield, and all the smoke was sucked into it. Then, with a soft cry, it returned to his body. In the southwest of the East Flower, 10,000 feet underground, two white-clothed female disciples were sitting in front of a large cauldron, cultivating, and there were thousands of demons protecting them. Suddenly, the thousands of demons flew above the cauldron as if they had gone crazy. Then, as if they were stirred up by a strong wind, they kept spinning within a radius of 10 feet, and their speed also became faster and faster. In less than half an hour, a figure slowly gathered from inside. After a while, Sima Quan appeared from within. However, his silhouette was faint and illusory, as if a random wave could blow him away. The two female disciples were a little panicked, but when they saw his figure, they hurriedly knelt down and said, "Disciple greets teacher." Sima Quan landed slowly and stood on the ear of the cauldron. He said, "Get up. My heavenly demon body just now fought with Qinsong School Zhang Yan, and it seems to have been destroyed, so I need to stay in seclusion. I can only return after 10 years of recuperation." If Sima Quan's doppelganger was too far away from the main body, the connection would be broken. They would be separated into two. Just like back then when he escaped into the void to search for opportunities, the doppelganger on the surface did not know where he was. It was only when he returned to the 9 continents that they merged into one again. If he did not return in the end, then after the doppelganger absorbed enough spiritual vigor, if it could gather again, it would replace the main body and become the heavenly demon. The two female disciples below were called Hui Xiao. Hui Xiao was slightly older and was the senior sister. After she stood up, she took a step forward and said worriedly, "If teacher is not here, what will happen to the people in the outer world?" Sima Quan said, "I have already cast a spell to hide the palace cauldrons in the outer world. Zhang Yan may not be able to find them. I have already left a communication method. After the two of you have refined the talismans, you can go and collect them." Hui Xiao said worriedly, "I wonder if they will betray teacher?" Sima Quan said, "Everyone pursues benefits. If I am not here, they will definitely have their own thoughts. However, with the heart-blood curse suppressing them, there is no need to worry about them betraying the heavenly palace of mysterious Yin. Moreover, they are far away in the outer world and do not communicate with the outside world, so they do not know about my matter. Your junior brother Yu Shao is also loyal to teacher, so he can suppress them. However, after this matter, the offerings in the outer world will definitely be cut off. The disciples who cultivate with the 6-in demon worm will be fine, but the cultivators who still follow the original path of the sect will no longer be able to cultivate in peace. If they are not willing to stay in the heavenly palace of mysterious In, they can be let go. Hui Shao said angrily, Teacher, if there is such a person, he must be an ungrateful person. Why should we keep him? Disciple is willing to clean up the sect for teacher. Sima Quan said, There is no need for that. Since I, Sima Quan, am unable to give them what they want, how can I force them to stay? Moreover, my heavenly palace of mysterious In is not destroyed just like that. With teacher here, there will be a day when we can rise again. Hui Shao bowed her head and said, Yes, disciple will gather the disciples well later, so that teacher's efforts will not go to waste. Sima Quan said, Do your best, there is no need to force things. That day, I ordered someone to bring an item from the outer world. I wonder if the two of you have received it? Hui Shao said, reporting to teacher, that item has successfully entered the hands of us two sisters yesterday. Is teacher going to retrieve it now? Sima Quan said, Yes, teacher is about to use it. Hui Shao cupped her hands by her lips and blew lightly. A sweet and light tone that fluctuated between high and low was transmitted out. Not long after, the sound of footsteps could be heard. It was a maidservant with a stone box in her hand. Under the signal of the two girls, she lowered her head and walked towards Sima Quan. Sima Quan inhaled, and the stone box naturally flew up and landed in his hand. He opened it, and the black pearl was placed inside. He was very satisfied. With this item, he could recover his strength in at least 100 years. It was a pity that by then he would have exhausted the essence of this item. He said, You did well. Where is the person who delivered the treasure now? Hui Shao said, He hasn't left yet. Sima Quan muttered, This person is extremely talented. Since he has entered my heavenly palace of mysterious In, I can't bear to see him go to waste. Now that there is an unforeseen event in the sky, there is no need for him to return. He can just cultivate in this underground cave. If he needs any external medicine for cultivation, just give it to him. Hui Shao said, Yes, the tribute for last month has yet to be handed over. It is enough for 100 people for half a year, but it is more than enough for him alone. Sima Quan said, All right, teacher is going to cultivate now. You can leave now. If there is nothing important, there is no need to disturb me. After sending the two disciples away, he transformed into a gust of chilly wind and flew into the cauldron. After a while, there was no more sound. In the void sky, Zhang Yan sat in the moon traversing flying raft. On the table in front of him were the items left behind by Sima Quan after he was eliminated. He first picked up the broken black jade slip, and discovered that there were quite a few fragments of consciousness inside. He circulated his magic power inside, and determined that it was a top-notch magical technique. However, the details inside had already been destroyed, so there was no way for him to identify its contents. Unless he asked the Heaven Mending Pavilion to help him, it was just now that he might be able to see its true appearance. However, because of the Qinsong school, the Heaven Mending Pavilion almost caused their mountain gate to fall from the sky. Under normal circumstances, they would definitely not be able to do such a thing. He shook his head, put down the broken jade slip, and took out the aperture-less origin essence stone. From the perspective of his mysterious heavenly passage, this object was not only able to travel through the void, but the energy inside it seemed to come from the same source as the spirit cave. Even though he was only holding it in his hand, it was as if he was in a heavenly passage paradise. In particular, there was a trace of indescribable energy inside that he could not truly see through. After thinking for a bit, he decided to go back to the Duzhen Palace and study it in detail. At this time, he suddenly felt something strange. He looked outside, and there was clearly nothing in the void. His eyes flashed, and he flicked his finger. A ray of sword light flew out, but after flying for a few dozen kilometers, It seemed to have hit something. Then, a huge palace cauldron floating in the void appeared in his mind. Zhang Yan sneered, so Sima Quan had a palace cauldron hidden here. If it wasn't for my sword heart sensing it, it would not have been easy to find. He took a few glances and shone the sword light outside, but he did not find Sima Quan's clone. There were only hundreds of cultivators in the palace who were of low cultivation to him, and they were the disciples that he had recruited in the past 2 years. If he made a move against these juniors, he would be lowering his status, and he could go back and call his disciples to clean them up. So, he threw out thousands of talismans and sealed the palace cauldron. Then, he did not care about it anymore, and urged the flying raft to speed toward the 9 continents. 3 days later, he arrived in the sky above Donghua. Because he did not deliberately hide his tracks, when the perfected persons of the Donghua sect saw him return, it was not difficult to guess that Sima Quan must have been defeated and killed by him. Even such a ferocious heavenly demon had once escaped from his hands. Many people had complicated feelings, but at the same time, they could not help but feel a trace of fear. Zhang Yan kept the flying raft in outer space. Then, he turned into a ray of light, broke through the clouds in the 9 heavens, and slowly landed on the floating heavenly palace. He first reported to the upper extreme hall, then returned to the crossing truth hall. Once he was seated, he wrote a letter and ordered people to go to the Huanzhen temple. The letter mentioned that although the heavenly demon had been eliminated, there were still remnants left under Donghua. If they were not cleaned up, there was a possibility that they would rise again. He thought that the arrangements in the South Sea had been delayed for a few years. Since the heavenly demon had been eliminated, it was time to act. So, he wrote another letter and sent it above the East Sea. After doing this, he pondered for a while, then ordered people to find his 2 disciples, Wang Kaiwei and Fu Baoxing. About an hour later, Wang Kaiwei and Fu Baoxing came to the hall. They bowed at the stairs and said, "Disciples pay their respects to Master, and wish Master a long life." Zhang Yan said, "This time, I went to the outer space to fight the heavenly demon, and I have already killed it. However, there are still 6 palace cauldrons floating in the void, and there are many disciples of the Dark Moon Palace among them. I just happened to find one. Although there is no battle between the mystic demons now, the disciples of the Zhao Yu sect will need to gain experience. I order you to lead the disciples to my flying raft to clean it up." Chapter 1079. After Zhang Yan sent out his 2 disciples, he made all the necessary arrangements. Naturally, he went into seclusion to recover the Fa Li that he had used up in the battle. After meditating for a day and a night, he had completely recovered. However, he was a little surprised. Although he didn't use much Fa Li in the battle with Sima Quan, his recovery speed was much faster than he had expected. At his level of cultivation, he knew his own situation like the back of his hand. He shouldn't have made any mistakes. Thinking back, when he was meditating just now, there seemed to be an indescribable qi circulating around him, which caused his cultivation speed to increase slightly. Thus, after some investigation, he discovered that the reason was actually due to the origin essence stone that he had obtained from Sima Quan. He originally intended to investigate this item, so he stretched out his hand and took out a jade book out of thin air, and he placed it in front of him. This was the Tongxian Jade Book of the Floating Heavenly Palace. Before the Dong Tian of the Floating Heavenly Palace turned around, he or she would drip a drop of his or her blood on it. This way, all the secrets that he or she had seen, his or her understanding of martial arts could be recorded in it for future generations to study. In the past, only the 3rd Hall Master could read this book. However, the calamity was approaching, so the sect leader relaxed the restriction, allowing the people of the heavenly abode to ask any questions they had. However, other than the 3rd Hall Master who could read it from time to time, the rest of the enlightened could only use it once every 100 days. Zhang Yan stretched out his hand and grabbed a wisp of qi from the origin essence stone. He placed it into the jade slip. However, after the brilliance on the jade slip flashed, the jade slip was actually blank, without a single word or 2. He couldn't help but feel moved. There were no words on the book, which meant that none of the heavenly abodes recognized this item. Since this item was indeed useful to him, its value might far exceed what he had previously thought. Only now did he become interested in this jade stone. After thinking about it seriously for a while, he waved his sleeves and sent the jade book back. At the same time, he made a hand sign, and after a while, the array door above the sky opened. A ray of green light brought a jade scroll down. This was also the Tong Xian jade scroll. Its usage was the same as the scroll just now had, but the person who remembered it was very different. All of the words on it were left behind by the previous ascended Jinren of the sect. Because there were even records left behind by the Grand Underworld founding ancestor, so its value was extraordinary. In the past, only the sect leader had the right to look at it. Even the Palace Master of Du Zhen and Palace Master of Tiankong could only look at it after reaching the third stage of the Elephant Phase realm. This time, it was also because of the Great Tribulation. Sect leader Qin loosened the restrictions and allowed him and Huoxian to borrow it once every 100 years. After Zhang Yan opened it, a bright light shone out from inside. He directed it with his mind, and after a while, lines of words appeared on it. He looked at it with rapt attention. His eyes flickered as he thought to himself, there's actually such a thing in this world. This time he flipped through the book. Although he gave up a chance to look at it once every 100 years, he felt that it was worth it. This item was called the Essence Stone of No Aperture. It should have been refined by ancient cultivators using the essence of heaven and earth. It could be used to protect one's body. Even if one went to the desolate domain or the void beyond the heavens, one could still use it to recover spiritual energy. It could also be used to recover spiritual energy. However, these weren't the main points. There was actually a strand of pure spiritual energy stored within it. In ancient times, this place was full of spiritual energy and was bathed in pure spiritual energy. After billions of years of accumulation, it would then produce such pure purple energy. Legend had it that after this energy was produced, it didn't gather in one place. Instead, it would scatter. Only those with profound spiritual energy could capture it bit by bit. In ancient times, the West continent was able to accommodate many mortal molten cultivators because there was a lot of this energy. Later on, due to the passive nature of the earth, since the creation of heaven and earth, the great momentum that had been flowing forward was broken. This energy was either taken by someone or dissipated between heaven and earth. If one wanted to accumulate it again, they would have to wait for billions of years. However, it had only been 10,000 years since the West continent's cultivators migrated east. Once the people of the Grotto Heaven achieved mortal molting, if they didn't find a way to break through the world and ascend, without this energy to replenish their spiritual energy, they would be trapped in this world until they died. Zhang Yan guessed that the pure purple spiritual energy left in the Essence Stone was refined by a powerful cultivator. However, he didn't know what happened, causing him to not have the time to use it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been left in the world. If this energy was used for cultivation, it would be of great benefit to a Grotto Heaven cultivator like him. His cultivation progress would be much faster than before. With the tribulation ahead, if he could increase his strength earlier, he would have a higher chance of passing it. At this moment, he couldn't help but think of the scene outside the Grotto Heaven. He suddenly had a thought and thought, could it be that Yuan Yang sent people to the palace cauldron to find this thing? If it was really for this essence stone, it would be worth Yuan Yang's sect leader's protection. I wonder if he got it. If he didn't, then it's fine. If he stole it, then it's very likely that there is more than one. However, he had already sent disciples to the Grotto Heaven to clean up the palace cauldrons. Everything would be clear when he came back. Thinking about this, he didn't think too much about it. He sat up straight and looked at the 9-demon vanquishing scroll. He wanted to know what would happen after it absorbed the heavenly demon essence chi. After looking at it, he saw that the outside of the object was wrapped in a cloud of smoke, as if something was happening. When he thought about it, he immediately felt a sense of joy surging up, and he instantly understood the reason. He was slightly surprised and then smiled. I was wondering why you were so happy when you saw the heavenly demon. So it was because of your own opportunity. As his cultivation progressed, the amount of essence chi that could be stored in the demon vanquishing scroll had reached its limit. Thus, he was looking for a chance to change. This time, the heavenly demon could help him, which was why he jumped several times. However, it was Zhang Yan's first time seeing an item that could be used to cleanse a treasure embryo without being refined by others. Even in the scriptures that he had read in the past, there were no records of it. Thus, he pondered in his heart. He wanted to see what kind of changes it would have after it was perfected. At the same time, Fu Baoxing and Wang Kaiwei took the flying raft and brought the disciples to the grotto heaven. After flying out of the 9 continents, they didn't fly far. A female disciple suddenly pointed and said, "Teacher, there seems to be something over there." Wang Kaiwei turned around, but there was nothing. She didn't see anything. She knew that her disciple wouldn't speak carelessly. She took out a spell and went into the killer Yin blade. They flew to the sky. After flying for a few dozen miles, they realized that they seemed to have passed through a layer of fog. Then, they saw a huge palace cauldron floating in front of them. It circled outside before returning to the flying raft and said to the female disciple, "Ning, you did well. I didn't expect there to be a palace cauldron hidden here. You've done a great service this time." Ning blushed a little when she was praised. She was a little embarrassed, but there was a hint of pride in her expression. Fu Baoxing looked at her cultivation. She was only at the 2nd level of core transformation. He said, "Senior sister's disciple seems to be born with sharp senses. She can even detect the hidden palace cauldron. This kind of talent is rare." Wang Kaiwei said, "When Ning was cultivating, she accidentally obtained a treasure. With its help, not only is her sense not inferior to ours, but she also has abilities that ordinary people don't have." Fu Baoxing said, "So that's how it is. Since we're ordered to clean up the disciples of the Dark Yin Heavenly Palace, we can't let this place go." Wang Kaiwei nodded and said, "I think so too." She raised her head and said, "Reverend Moon Fairy, please turn here." A cold voice was heard. Understood. The flying raft's true spirit was originally very unwilling to carry these juniors, but it was forced by Zhang Yan's power. It did not dare to disobey, but if no special attention was paid to it, it would do things on its own and would not care about the others. The flying raft turned around and approached the Cauldron Palace. Soon, it was within a few miles of the Cauldron Palace. As if it had passed through a layer of barrier, its true appearance was slowly revealed. However, there was no movement inside. It was the first time some of the disciples on the boat followed their masters out. Many of them were indescribably excited. They saw that they were getting closer and closer to the cauldron. Many of them looked nervous as well. Out of caution, Wang Kaiwei took out a talisman. This talisman was given to her by Zhang Yan, and it could be used to find out the general situation of the place they were going to. After chanting an incantation, she threw it forward. The talisman instantly turned into a beam of light and swept across the cauldron. After circling it once, it turned back. She reached out and caught it. After checking it, she relaxed slightly. The strength of the Cauldron Palace was much weaker than they had imagined. Probably because the disciples here came from the surface, there were all kinds of cultivators, especially those in the Mystic Light realm and Clear Chi realm. The core transformation realm was 2nd, and there was only one Yuanying cultivator. After all, once one reached the Yuanying realm, one would be an elder of a sect. No matter what, the sect would not treat them too badly. They could be worshippers wherever they went. Apart from a few eccentric cultivators or those who were hiding from their enemies, there were very few who wandered outside. As for those who cultivated Dharma bodies, it was even more impossible for them to be here. On Wang Caiwei's side, other than Fu Baoxing, there were also Yuan Yanhui and Wang Xion. All of them were at the 2nd stage of the nascent soul realm, which was enough to suppress the other party. She waited for the flying raft palace cauldron to stop horizontally before saying to Fu Baoxing, "Junior brother, please guard this place in case the devil sect has any ill intentions." Fu Baoxing said calmly, "Don't worry, senior sister. I'll take care of everything here." At that moment, the voice of the true spirit of Du was heard, and it seemed to be dissatisfied. "Do you think that a few demons can control my treasure raft body?" Wang Kaiwei smiled and did not argue with her. She took out a small seal and waved it downward. Everyone here was covered with a layer of treasure light, which was to prevent them from being hurt by the poisonous fire and strong qi. After putting the seal away, she said, "Disciples, follow me." She was the first to jump down, and the disciples followed behind her. Wang and Yuan Yanhui guarded the sides of the cauldron. Hundreds of light rays flew into the cauldron. However, when they arrived inside, there was no one in the hall. It was obvious that the disciples here knew that they were here and hid. However, before they could do anything, they heard whistling sounds. Many demons came from both sides of the hall. Wang Kaiwei said, "Disciples, listen up. These demons can pollute the spiritual vigor of treasures. Be careful and don't be careless." The disciples took out their magic tools and attacked the demons. However, since Sima Quan was dead, the demon's strength was greatly reduced, so it was not difficult to deal with them. Therefore, Wang Kaiwei and the others did not attack. They only looked around and guarded against the perfected Yuanying who was hiding in the dark. After fighting for less than an hour, the disciples finally wiped out all the demons. However, with the exception of a few people, most of them had pained expressions. That was because during the battle, the magic tools had been contaminated by the demonic energy and some had been destroyed on the spot. However, even at this moment, not a single disciple of the palace appeared. Wang Kaiwei could not help but frown. After discussing with Yuan Yanhui and Wang for a while, they each led a group of disciples and searched around. At this moment, outside, Fu Baoxing, who was standing on the flying raft, suddenly felt something. He looked over and saw a sky ship flying out from the back of the palace cauldron, silently escaping in the direction of the 9 continents. After watching for a while, he used his mana to condense a talisman and sent it into the cauldron palace. After a while, rays of light flew out and returned to the flying raft, then chased after the sky ship. Soon, the 2 rays of light went far away. However, on the other side of the cauldron palace, another sky ship flew out. There were dozens of people standing on the deck, and the person in the lead was a Taoist with long hair who had the cultivation of Yuanying. Someone at the side praised, "Senior brother Lu is smart. First, you used the demons to stop the enemy, then you released a sky ship to the 9 continents. Those Taoist disciples must think that we are all on the ship, but they don't know that it is just an empty ship. They won't think that we are still hiding here. By the time they realize that something is wrong and come back, we will have already escaped." Seeing that his plan was successful, Taoist Lu was secretly proud of himself, but he did not lose his cool. He said, "We are not completely out of danger yet. The flying objects that those Taoist disciples are using are probably real treasures. It won't take them long to catch up with the sky ship. We should leave quickly and hide in the palace cauldron where senior brother sure is." Everyone agreed. They thought that they were going to die for sure, but they did not expect the road to turn around. They all wanted to escape as soon as possible. Taoist Lu did not say anything else. He steered the sky ship with all his might and headed in one direction. However, he did not realize that there was a blade light hidden in the void, following closely behind the sky ship. After 3 days, Wang Kaiwei, who had been chasing behind, felt that something was wrong. She wanted to use the sky ship to find the next palace cauldron, but she underestimated the power of the heavenly poison fire and strong wind. If she went for a few more days, the spirituality of the Yin killer blade might be damaged. Therefore, she decided to board the sky ship first and subdue them. Then, she would try to interrogate them about the whereabouts of the other palace cauldrons. After she made up her mind, she suddenly sped up and used the blade light to tear open the protective barrier of the sky ship. Then she rushed in. The people on the sky ship were shocked to see that someone could break into the sky ship from outside. Lu Andu was also shocked, but he could still maintain his composure. He shouted, "Who is it?" Wang Kaiwei retracted her traveling light and landed on the ship's railing. The Yin killer's saber turned into a beam of spiritual light and circled around her, causing her skirt to flutter. The 3 balls of high cloud above her suddenly turned into black gas and then white smoke. She cast her gaze down and said, "Wang Kaiwei of Zhao Yu sect." Chapter 1080. In an instant, the expressions of everyone on the heavenly boat changed greatly, and fear appeared in their eyes. The people here were either from sects or independent cultivators who had wandered outside for many years. How could they not know the fame of the clear nether heavenly lake? Wang Kaiwei was the third disciple of the Duzhen Hall master of the Qinsong school. Her background was frightening, even without mentioning that her cultivation was not something they could contend with. Lu Anda said bitterly, "Since Sage Wang has come here, my little trick must have been seen through. However, I still want to ask, where is the palace master of the heavenly palace?" When the people on the boat heard this, they all looked over with wide eyes. However, some of them trembled slightly. It was obvious that they were filled with nervousness and uneasiness. Wang Kaiwei said in a clear voice, "Sima Quan fought with my master above the sky a few days ago. He has already been defeated." Everyone couldn't help but hold their breaths, and an atmosphere of terror spread in the surroundings. Lu Daoist sighed and said, "As expected." He raised his head and bowed, "Sage Wang, I surrender." If Sima Quan was here, he would still be willing to try. However, he had been defeated, so everything was meaningless. Moreover, fighting outside the sky made it impossible for the original spirit to reincarnate, so why fight to the death? Wang Kaiwei looked at him and nodded. "Fellow Lu, you have renounced darkness and entered the light. This is the right choice." Seeing that he had voluntarily surrendered and was accepted by Wang Kaiwei, most of the people on the boat also shouted to surrender. However, there were still a few people who were unwilling and tried to resist. These people were not very loyal to Sima Quan, but they were originally devil cultivators and had done many things that tormented living beings. They knew that the celestial sect of wonders would never let them go. However, before Wang Kaiwei could make a move, Lu Andu had already called everyone to kill them on the spot. Seeing that this matter was settled, Wang Kaiwei brought them back to meet up with the moon crossing flying raft. Because they had Lu An's support, they successfully found 3 palace cauldrons that were hidden in the void, and also captured all the disciples of the lunar temple in one fell swoop. Then, they circled around the 9 continents, and took away the 2 palace cauldrons that had long been exposed. However, the last palace cauldron was nowhere to be found. A month had already passed. When Wang Kaiwei and Fu Baoxing saw that they had almost fulfilled their master's orders, they returned from outer space. The Zhao Yu disciples that had come out to battle this time had practically all experienced a life and death battle. Even though they looked exhausted, there was a bit more vigor in them. After the flying raft returned to Donghua, it only stopped at the location of the bright nether heavenly lake and did not enter the mansion because it was afraid that the disciples here or the disciples of the Dark Yin sect would be poisoned. Wang Kaiwei left the rest of the matter to Fu Baoxing to handle, while she went to the Duzhen Hall to report on the completion of the task. He flew up to the floating heavenly palace. After reporting to his teacher, he was summoned into the hall. After greeting his teacher, he explained everything that had happened. After reporting, she continued, "When disciples searched the palace cauldron, I found many rare treasures, but among them were 3 pieces of strange jade. It looks extraordinary, but this disciple doesn't recognize it. Because I'm afraid it's a demonic creature left behind by Sima Quan, I can only present it to my teacher to identify it." She took off a bag and took out 3 jade boxes. Jing Yu came down to take them and placed them on the table. Zhang Yan waved his sleeves and opened the lid. As expected, it was the Honorifice Essence Energy Stone. He thought to himself, "It seems like my guess was right, there is more than one of this item. That last cauldron might also have this item. However, since we can't find it, it should have escaped into the depths of the void. There is no need to bother about it." His eyes looked at the 3 essence energy stones. Now that he had 3 more strands of purple spiritual energy, it would definitely help him improve his cultivation. Maybe not long later, he would be able to use it to open up a heavenly place and step into the second realm. Ever since the Sky Demon was killed, Tao Jinren and Mi Jinren guessed that they could continue with the matters in the South Sea. As expected, a few days later, they received a letter from Zhang Yan and knew that they could move. To avoid alerting the Yuxiao school, the 2 of them hid in a small world many years ago to prevent their qi from leaking out. Now, they even used a secret technique to conceal their qi activity and traveled south from the bottom of the sea. It took them more than 40 days and just now, they had arrived at the South Sea. Li Xiaomi noticed the two of them and personally came out to welcome them. After exchanging greetings, he said, "The sea is stormy and dangerous. It is not a good place to receive guests. Please follow me." He gestured and led the two of them into the sea. The formation plate under the sea had long been built and stabilized. There was not much left to do. It was just that in order to prevent the news from leaking out, it was not good to let the water tribe leave. Therefore, for the past 2 years, besides slightly expanding the formation base, Li Xiaomi also ordered them to build a palace in the sea. He invited the two of them into the palace to take a seat and ordered the maids to serve the fruits and wine. Li Xiaomi picked up a cup of wine and said, "This place is simple and crude, there is nothing to entertain you with. I will drink a cup to express my lack of hospitality." After saying that, he drank it in one gulp and sat down. Tao Jinren smiled and picked up a cup from the table and said, "Jinrenli has been overseas for dozens of years. It is especially difficult for you to build a formation plate from nothing. I hope that this time we can work together and establish a foothold here, so that we can live up to Jinren Zhang's trust." Mi Jinren seemed to remember the last time they were chased away by Yu Xiao School. She said coldly, "This time we are well prepared. We will not let Yu Xiao have an easy time." She picked up her cup as well. The three of them toasted from afar and drank. Tao Jinhong said, "There is still a hurdle to overcome. When my formation chart and formation plate are combined, it will affect the spiritual vigor within a radius of tens of thousands of miles. Perhaps it will cause a huge commotion. It will be difficult for Yu Xiao School not to notice. We need to guard against them attacking at this moment and disrupting our formation." Li Xiaomi said, "When I came to the South Sea to build the formation plate, I had thought about this. However, I happened to find an item that might be able to deceive them." Tao Jinhong asked, "Oh, what is it?" Li Xiaomi smiled and said, "Allow me to keep you in suspense. Please follow me." He led the two out of the palace and walked along the floating waves sand path. There was a glazed wall of spiritual light here, which kept the seawater out. Fishes swam back and forth on the surface, and the waves rippled with colorful lights. On the bottom of the white sand, there were glowing teardrop pearls buried every 10 feet, illuminating the originally pitch-black seabed like a crystal immortal palace. Mi Jinren gave a rare compliment and said, "Fellow Taoist Li, the construction here is not bad. It is much better than those clay platforms." Li Xiaomi shook his head and smiled. Those so-called clay platforms were the formation altars that he built for the three of them. When he asked for the 4 words, firm, calm, and deep, he did not have many requirements for the appearance. Because they were built by the marine race, the appearance was indeed crude and ugly. There was a sense of savagery about it. He did not expect that it would make Mi Jinren unhappy. He pointed downwards and said, "This place was not built by me, but by the mermaids that I caught. As for these pearls, they were formed by the tears of the mermaids." Mi Jinren's eyes lit up and he said, "Mermaids?" Li Xiaomi said, "Yes, these marine race are stupid. They can't do even the slightest bit of work. That day, for the convenience of building, I caught a group of mermaids and brought them here. But they were indeed useful, and later on, the progress of building the formation plate was much faster." Mi Jinren stopped and looked at him. "Where are the mermaids now? Fellow Taoist Li, can you lead me there to take a look?" Li Xiaomi looked at her expression and seemed to be quite interested in the mermaids, as if the purpose of this trip was not urgent. Fortunately, that matter was not urgent, so there was no need to refute her. He said, "Fellow Taoists, please follow me." With a flick of his sleeve, the floating waves sand path under his feet immediately turned and headed towards another path. The three of them used the force of the space to tread on the sand. In just a few dozen breaths, they arrived in front of a canyon under the sea. There were 2 armored mermaid guards in front of the canyon. When they saw Li Xiaomi, they bowed and said, "Marquis." Li Xiaomi said, "I have 2 esteemed guests here today. Quickly open the canyon gate." The mermaids did not dare to disobey and open the seal. They allowed the 3 of them to enter. Once inside, Mi Jinren's gaze turned and saw that there were about 100 mermaids here. Most of them were ugly, so she only took a glance and did not look anymore. However, when she saw a spot in the middle of the valley, it caught her attention. There were about a dozen flat round stones that were about 3 feet in size. They were exquisite and smooth, like the skin of a virgin. There were about a dozen beautiful female mermaids lying on them. One of their hands supported their cheeks while the other was around their waist. Their chests rose and fell slightly, looking like they were sleeping yet not sleeping, as if they were breathing in and out spiritual vigor. Mi Jinren stared at them without blinking. In the end, she pointed and said, "Fellow Taoist Li, why don't you give those mermaids to me?" Li Xiaomi took a look and saw a few young mermaids. There were a few strong female mermaids combing their braids. He said, "Since Mi Jinren has asked, how can I not agree? However, those young mermaids are still young and cannot live without parents to take care of them. There is no harm in bringing them back." Mi Jinren nodded and said, "All right. However, I have never owed anyone anything. If fellow Taoist Li has anything to do, you can tell me." Li Xiaomi initially treated it as a small matter and did not take it to heart. However, when he saw her unusually serious expression, he thought for a while and said, "There is indeed one thing. I have a diagram of the Star Breaker 1000 Refinements formation. However, setting up this formation requires a killing weapon to suppress it. Even though I don't have such an item here, fellow Taoist Yin-Yang origin leaving blade chi is extremely sharp. In a frontal attack, other than sword cultivators, there are very few who can match it. I am thinking if fellow Taoist can find a way to refine it into a talisman and place it into the formation. This way we will have another killing method." When Mi Jinren heard that, he did not even have the slightest hesitation and agreed, "Sure. However, using mana like this will definitely consume a lot of energy. I will need some time to cultivate. After I have recovered, I will be able to fight against Yu Xiao School. If we do this, the two of you will have to wait for at least another half a year." Tao Jinren smiled and said, "That is not a problem. Yu Xiao School is a great enemy. No matter how we prepare, it will not be enough. Since Sage Zhang knows about this, I believe he will be happy to see it happen." Mi Jinren nodded. Although Chongyue Jingguan's move to the south was initially suspected of being forced, Zhang Yan had never treated them unfairly. What she was most satisfied with was that Zhang Yan only said what to do. As for how exactly they were going to do it, he never asked. Although they lost a lot of mana in the last battle, Qinsong School also sent a lot of elixir jades. Coming out from the Merman's Valley, the three of them walked towards the center of the formation plate. Before they got close, they saw a strange white insect that looked like a shellfish but not a shellfish. It was 100 feet long and was half buried in the sand. Its 6 long feelers swayed in all directions and could reach miles away. Tao Jinren was stunned. His eyes actually flashed and he said, "Seven-eyed Shingu? I thought there was no such strange insect in the world." Li Xiaomi was surprised and said, "Fellow Taoist recognizes this thing." "That's right, fellow Taoist is originally from Nanhua sect. I believe there are many strange beasts and strange insects in the world that you do not know." Tao Jinren shook his head and said, "How would I dare? My ability to identify strange creatures is not even 1/10,000th of my late master's." Mi Jinren frowned and said, "What does fellow Taoist Tao mean by the 7 eyes? I have looked many times and only saw a pair of eyes on this insect." Tao Jinren said, "What fellow Taoist Mi saw are fake eyes. The real eyes are on its back. However, it only opens one eye every 1,000 years. Therefore, the eyes are the foundation of its vitality. Unless it is in a life and death situation, it will definitely not use it. Normally, it is hidden under layers of thick shell. From what I see, for this insect to be able to grow to this size, it must have lived for at least 6,000 years. It should have grown 6 eyes and is only lacking one last eye. If it reaches the full number, it will be able to build its foundation and transform into a human. At that time, its supernatural power will not be below us." Li Xiaomi was surprised and said, "It is actually so powerful. Why did I feel that it was so easy to capture it that day?" Tao Jinren smiled and said, "Then everything in the world has its weakness. No matter how powerful this insect is, it is still a water race. Fellow Taoist Li has the body of a dragon and is also the demon marquis of the demon court. This insect has not transformed into a human. How would it dare to be rash in front of fellow Taoist? As he said this, he looked at the mirage insect and said, I think fellow Taoist wants to use this insect to transform into an illusion and conceal the secrets of heaven, so that Yu Xiao will not be able to detect it when we set up the formation. Li Xiaomi nodded and said, that is exactly what I mean. Tao Jinren said, this insect has opened 6 eyes. If it is only used for this, I am afraid it is a little overkill. He thought for a while and said, I have a method that may allow this insect to grow one last eye in a short period of time. In this way we will have one more helper. Li Xiaomi looked over and said, is this method a little troublesome? Tao Jinren said, it is not necessarily troublesome. This method only needs a lot of rare spiritual herbs, and if it is done, I am afraid it will take a year. Li Xiaomi laughed and said, it seems that there is more than one thing we need to do. Tao Jinhong also smiled and said, I do not have those spiritual herbs with me. I can only write a letter to Jinren Zhang and ask him to make a decision. Seeing that neither of them had any objections, he wrote a letter and sent it to the Qinsong school. But 3 days later, a bird sent the letter back, along with the spiritual herbs that Tao Jinren asked for. So he did not delay any longer and immediately entered Li Xiaomi's palace to refine the spiritual herbs. And Mi Jinren also kept his promise and asked for an alchemy room. Day and night, he circulated his spiritual energy and infused the blade qi into the talisman. Li Xiaomi also did not stay idle. Since he had something to suppress it, he went into seclusion to refine the 1,000 refining killing formation. At this time, the South Sea was calm, but it was obvious that it would not be long before another great battle started. Chapter 1081. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed in the Southern Sea territory. On this day, in the underwater palace, the alchemy room opened. Mi Jinren walked out with her hair tied with a golden rope, a silk sash around her waist, and a long dress that dragged on the floor. She walked into the main hall and saw a flat round stone placed on her seat. Looking at its shape, it was the one used by the merman. However, it looked even more exquisite, indicating that the material used was extraordinary. Even though she was a little far away, she could feel that it was extraordinarily spiritual. It was attracting spiritual vigor from all around, and her eyes lit up. Li Xiaomi was sitting on the cattail hassock on the main seat. He said, that day, I saw that you seemed to like this item, so I ordered the merman to make one out of nephrite. If your cultivation is damaged, meditate on this, and you will recover much faster than before. Mi Jinren scoffed and said, I don't like this item, but I noticed its uniqueness, so I paid more attention to it. She went to the main hall and sat on the stone. With a flip of her wrist, she took out a stack of talismans and passed them to him. She said, these are the talismans that you needed. There are a total of 99 of them, and I used my full strength in every slash. Li Xiaomi thanked her and accepted it with a smile. Even though he asked her to make this talisman for the battle in the Southern Sea, he knew that he actually took advantage of her. Even though Mi Jinren agreed readily, she might still have a problem in her heart. That was why he made this item to calm her down, and it seemed like it worked. He took it and examined it. He praised sincerely, only 10 to 20% of the talisman's power is lost. Jinren Mi is really good. Spiritual Master Dong Tian used his full strength 99 times, and it was said that the power was great. However, if it was refined into a talisman, it would lose 30 to 50% of its power. As time passed, the power would continue to decrease, and it would dissipate completely in a few hours. Even if it was placed in a formation plate, once it was used, it would not take more than half a day. This was also to deal with the current situation. If it was used elsewhere, it would not be worth it. No one would do it. However, Mi Jinren's talisman suffered very little damage, which was beyond his expectations. Mi Jinren said proudly, my Chongyue Jingguan's Li Yuan Yin Yang flying dagger focuses on the fusion of yin and yang. It can be used for both life and death. If not for my lack of skill, I wouldn't have suffered any damage. Li Xiaomi nodded and put away the talisman. He was about to place it into the array diagram. He glanced at the inner hall and said with some worry, "I wonder when fellow Taoist Tao can come out." Although he did not know what medicine Tao Jinren wanted to refine, it was not as simple as it was originally said to make the strange mirage worm grow 7 eyes. For the sake of concocting this medicine, he had wasted an entire year. However, it was difficult for him to explain to Zhang Yan. Mi Jinren, on the other hand, was extremely confident in Tao Jinren. Fellow Taoist Li, there's no need to overthink things. Fellow Taoist Tao never speaks nonsense. Just wait for him to come out. At this moment, Tao Jinren was standing in the pill room, looking at a white furnace floating in the air above. Below the furnace body, there was a wisp of blue smoke floating up. This was the palace returning in fire drawn from the earth aperture. Above the furnace mouth, there was a steam engine. Inside, there was a small worm floating. It first turned into a larva. Then, it spun silk into a cocoon. Not long after, it broke out of the cocoon and became a butterfly. Finally, it died. Its life was completed in a short day. At this time, the worm corpse changed again, turning into a light-colored pill. However, it was full of vitality, giving people the feeling that it could turn into a worm again at any time. Although this thing was a pill, after being sacrificially refined by his hands, it could give birth to a spirit. From life to death. From death to life, it needed 365 days before the medicinal power could be fully penetrated. And just now, it was already the last turn. Once this pill was formed, it would be buried in the body of the Shen worm and fuse with its soul. With this pill, it could control its blood essence and energy. In this way, it could draw out its potential and force the worm to give birth to the 7th eye. Tao Jinren looked at this pill and was slightly in a trance. In the past, his master, Taoist He, wanted to use this method to borrow the blood essence of the spirit beasts in the sect to break through the barrier between heaven and man. He spent his entire life trying to deduce to the point of great success, so that the disciples in the sect could imitate the method of ascension. However, in the end he still failed on the verge of success and was feared by many of the disciples in the sect. At that time, he only saw a little bit of it, but it was enough to push the Shen worm into the 7 eyes realm. At this moment, he saw that the pill suddenly moved, as if it was going to reincarnate from death. He pointed down, intercepting the breath at the last moment, and it suddenly stopped moving. He stretched out his hand, took it into his hand, and put it into his sleeve. Then he pushed the stone door and went outside. When he came to the main hall, the 2 people in the hall unconsciously looked over. Li Xiaomi stood up and said, "Did it go smoothly?" Tao Jinren bowed and said, "Fortunately, it is done." Li Xiaomi's heart relaxed, laughed, and said, "Good, to make the Shen worm give birth to 7 eyes, what else do we need?" Tao Jinren said, "Everything is ready, we can subdue the Shen worm." Li Xiaomi nodded and said, "Then there is no need to delay." The 3 of them went out of the hall together, walked along the floating waves sand path to the front of the Shen worm, and stopped 10 feet away. At this time, the long whiskers of the Shen worm were enough to touch the 3 of them, but it was blocked by a repulsive force, and it couldn't touch them at all. Tao Jinren made a hand sign, and a big yellow hand stretched out from above and grabbed it. The Shen worm couldn't help but struggle and scream. Taking advantage of this time, he lightly flicked his finger, and the pill in his hand flew into the mouth of the Shen worm. The Shen worm trembled, and the hissing stopped. Then it slowly lay down, as if it had fallen into a coma. Tao Jinren reached into his sleeve and handed a jade talisman to Li Xiaomi. He carefully explained the use of it, and said, "As long as you refine this talisman, you can control the spirit of this Shen worm. As a demon marquis, it will be more convenient for you to do this." Li Xiaomi naturally took the responsibility, and she reached out to take it and refined it on the spot. In less than 2 hours, it was successful. At this time, the Shen worm also woke up, but it was different from before. On its back, there was a row of vertical eyes, and behind it, there was a long whisker. Tao Jinhong smiled and said, "It's done. There's no time to lose. Please cast a spell, and let this Shen worm use its magical power to isolate this side of the sea." Li Xiaomi said yes, and according to the method taught by Tao Jinren, she pointed in front of her body. With his fingers in front of him, he used his magic power, and the mirage worm propped up its upper body. The eyes on the mirage worm opened one after another. Soon, all 7 eyes were opened, and one could only see the flowing light. Tao Jinren looked over. After all, this method forcibly used the blood essence and vitality. As long as the 7 eyes were aligned, the vitality of the Shin worm was constantly being consumed. This kind of natural variant. Originally, it was not an exaggeration to have a lifespan of more than 10,000 years, but after using this method, it only had 400 to 500 years of life left. The only advantage was that after this Shin worm died, its primordial spirit was no different from the 7-eyed Shin worm when it was at its peak. If it reincarnated into a human, it would be a natural variant, and there was a great possibility of obtaining the fate of Tao. Through the Jade Talisman, Li Xiaomi felt that her own spirit was connected with the Shin worm. With just a thought, she could make it obey her command. So she took out a spell, and the Shin worm opened its mouth. Clouds of Shun Qi spurted out. It was originally misty and blurry. Soon, it passed through the heavy sea water and reached the sky. Soon, this Qi became more and more, and in less than 2 hours, it covered tens of thousands of miles of the sea. Mi Jinren said, "I don't know what the scene is like up there." Tao Jinren said, "Then let's go up and take a look." Li Xiaomi had no objection. The 3 of them jumped up, and a clear light appeared above the sea. Looking up, there was no more sea water in front of them. It was actually deep in a jungle valley. The water was gurgling, and the birds were singing. Mi Jinren couldn't help but show a hint of surprise. She knew that the scene was fake, but her senses didn't feel anything wrong. Tao Jinren said, "Normal illusions can only fool the senses of the eyes, ears, nose, and ears. This Shen worm's supernatural power is to create a miraculous scene on the human heart. If one is attacked in this illusion, the body will also be injured." Mi Jinren frowned. "Then aren't we trapped together?" Tao Jinren smiled. "How can we not be prepared?" He took out 3 pills from his sleeve and gave 2 to the 2 of them, saying, "I refined these pills from the Shen worm's belly. Consuming it can prevent the illusion from attacking, but there is poison in it. It will take a few days to refine it." After Li and Mi Jinren took it, the 3 of them consumed it on the spot, and then sat down to refine it. After a day and night, the 3 of them succeeded in refining it. When they looked again, the scene was gone. There were only undulating waves, and it was difficult to see the end of the endless sea. Tao Jinren stood in the sky, looked around, and sighed. Within a radius of 10,000 miles, the spiritual vigor of the earth's veins have been connected by fellow Taoistly. If there is a chance to move the mountains and fill the sea, and plant spiritual trees everywhere, it will become a blessed land in the future. Li Xiaomi looked into the distance and said, "But if we don't have this kind of cultivation, just one wind and wave can destroy it. Only if we diligently maintain it for thousands of years can we stabilize the mountains and rivers, causing it to form its own spiritual vein. Among us, who would harm their cultivation to do such a strenuous and unrewarding thing?" Mi Jinren said coldly, "Even if it is done, if there is no successor among the younger generation, it is just a wedding dress for others." At this point, the 3 of them were silent. They were all the leaders of a sect, and they knew how difficult it was to maintain a sect. At least a few generations were needed to support a sect, but if the foundation was not solid, and there was no successor, it would decline quickly. Just like Donghua Mystic Demon 16 sects, other than the 4 major sects, the rest were all succeeded by the descendants. After a moment, Tao Jinren smiled and said, "There is no point in thinking too much before the disaster. Only by avoiding it, then there is hope to talk about the rest." Li Xiaomi turned his head and cupped his hands. "Then fellow Taoist Tao, please set up the formation here. I will go down and play with the mirage worm first. This battle is dangerous. You 2 Taoists must be careful." He had the body of a Jiao dragon, and he fought in the sea. Even though he was only at the first level of the elephant realm and had not opened the grotto heaven, but in terms of survival ability, he was the best here. Tao Jinren and Mi Jinren returned the bow. Li Xiaomi's body shook, and he sank into the water. Tao Jinren, on the other hand, flicked his sleeves and threw out the formation maps, allowing them to cover. If there was no formation base, then these formation maps would be rootless trees, and they could only rely on their own strength to fight against external enemies. But Li Xiaomi had been operating here for decades, and during this period she had used countless aquatic creatures to open up the spiritual opportunity of the earth veins. As soon as the formation maps were set up, they immediately merged, and countless spiritual opportunity gathered here. South Cliff Continent, Sunken Boat Cliff. Zhou Ruiying sat on the altar, and she was teaching the essence of Tao to the disciples of the clan. There were about 100 people sitting below, and they were all the most outstanding disciples of this generation. They could come here to listen to her teachings once every 3 months. As for those direct disciples, they were naturally taught by the other Grotto Heaven spiritual masters of the Zhou clan. They would not mix with these disciples of the side branches. When she was talking about a key part of a spell, a rainbow suddenly flew over. She took a look, and her expression changed slightly, and she said, "Spiritual opportunity changes tens of thousands of miles above the South Sea? Could it be that Tao Jinhong and the rest are back?" During the battle in the South Sea decades ago, although Yuxiao School had chased Tao Jinhong and Mi Xiaonan out of the South Sea, they did not let their guard down. As they were afraid that they would come back again, they stationed a few small sects on the Fengling Ocean, and there were Zhou clan cultivators on every island. Once there was any movement, they would have to inform the mountain gate immediately. Zhou Ruiying did not dare to take this lightly, and she immediately turned into a beam of light and shadow, and left the South Cliff Continent, heading towards the South Sea. She was traveling very quickly, and soon she arrived at the place where the qi dynamic changed. However, when she looked over, she saw 3 clouds of smoke rushing into the sky. Black fog filled the sky, and there were many black and red lava rocks mixed in it. The rumbling sound shook the heaven and earth, and the nearby seawater kept rolling. It was actually boiling from the heat, and as soon as she got close, she could feel a burning sensation. After looking carefully for a while, she muttered to herself, "So it's the earth fire bursting, and the 3 mountains moving at the same time, which is rare. I think there was originally a spiritual vein under the sea here, and it was washed away, which caused the spiritual vigor to leak out." She checked back and forth a few times, and found that there was no problem. When she was about to leave, she suddenly stopped, and in the depths of her heart, she felt that something was wrong. After thinking for a while, she dived into the sea, and a moment later, she dived into the depths of the sea. She circled around the 3 mountains that were spewing thick smoke, and found that the heat here was a notch higher. At the bottom, there was a thick layer of white ash, and many corpses of the marine race were buried there. With a slight stir, the seawater became muddy. She saw that it was indeed heaven and earth Whaley, and did not seem to be man-made, so she turned around and returned to the sky. Li Xiaomi watched her figure go far away, and sent her voice to the sea, "Fortunately, this Zhou Ruiying is here today, or else we can't hide from him." Mi Zhenren said disdainfully, "So what if she doesn't use the light and shadow? Could it be that her real body is here? Even if she is willing to use her mana, I'm afraid she won't dare to enter the sea." Tao Jinren said, "Fellow Taoists, don't worry. Unless she has a treasure that can see through the illusion, it will be hard for her to tell the truth." Mi Zhenren said, "This insect's illusion is so powerful, doesn't it mean that only a few people can handle it?" Tao Jinren shook his head. "This insect's body is naturally weak. If we can find its real body, we can kill it with a lightning bolt. When fighting with Yuxiao, even though it is a great weapon, it still needs to be well protected." Li Xiaomi and Mi Zhenren nodded. They had seen the supernatural power of this insect with their own eyes, and it could even hide from the people of Dongtian, which showed how powerful it was. If it was used well, it could undoubtedly increase their fighting power by several folds. At the same time, in another place, although Zhou Ruiying took advantage of the clear light to go back, there was a strange feeling in her heart that she could not erase. After flying for more than 2 hours, she stopped at the sea. After thinking for a while, she decided to go back and take another look, so she turned around and went back. Chapter 1082. It didn't take long for Zhou Ruing to return to her original place of investigation. She then turned into a rainbow and hovered in the sky. Li Xiaomi saw that she didn't leave. She controlled the mirage worms to maintain the mirage qi and transmitted her voice. Why did she come back? Did she find something? Tao Jinren pondered for a while and smiled. If she really found something wrong, she wouldn't be like this. She would have called someone here long ago. Mi Jinren looked up to the sky. The saber light between her fingers was dancing as if she could attack at any time. She turned her head and said, Tao Jinren, how long will it take for you to set up the formation? Tao Jinren smiled and said, in fact, it can be used now. But it will take another 5 days to complete the formation. This is far beyond what I expected. In his consideration, Yuxiao School would only give him half a day to set up the formation. After that, he could only use this half-completed formation to face the enemy. He didn't want the mirage worms as a cover, so he had enough time to complete the formation. Mi Jinren dispersed the saber light between her fingers and said coldly, then let her go this time. Zhou Ruing once again used her heart to sense the surroundings, but she still didn't find anything unusual. After half a day, she suddenly waved her sleeves and released hundreds of hard thunderbolts. At the same time, her body also became blurred. This split shadow had no combat power. It was just a strand of her qi dynamic. After this move, she was also on the verge of collapse. Mi Jinren and Li Xiaomi's expressions changed slightly. The formation was not completely set up. If the hard thunderbolts fell, it would alarm the formation board and counterattack. It would be difficult to hide. But if they tried to block it, they would be exposed immediately. However, Tao Jinren shook his sleeves on the spot as if he wasn't afraid of being discovered. He kept all the hard thunderbolts and said, everyone, don't worry. Just now, Zhou Ruing's shadow clone has been here for a long time. It has been contaminated with a lot of mirage qi. The deeper this qi penetrates, the more it will sink into the illusion. Now, even if the two of you walk under her eyes, if you don't want to be discovered, I will definitely not expose my tracks. Sure enough, Zhou Ruing didn't seem to notice anything. In her eyes, she had already opened up a crack in one of the mountains, and the earth fire was spewing out even more intensely. There was no one hiding inside, nor was there anything unusual. He couldn't help but think, could it be that I'm worrying too much? She shook her head. There was no reason for her to feel uneasy, so she cast a spell. He then sat cross-legged in the sky. After waiting for 3 days, a flying boat came over. There were 5 or 6 cultivators on it, and the leader was a silver-bearded old man. He bowed and said respectfully, Spiritual Master Zhou, why did you summon me here? Zhou Ruing said, there's something strange about this place. I suspect that someone is causing mischief here. All of you stay here and keep watch. Quickly come and report to me. The silver-bearded old man bowed and said, yes, this lowly one will definitely guard this place diligently. Zhou Ruing said, don't slack off. Then, he turned into a streak of rainbow light. He returned to the southern cliff continent with peace of mind. Once she left, those cultivators were naturally not in the eyes of the 3 grotto heavens below, so they left them here and didn't bother about them at all. Another 2 days later, Tao Jinren had completely set up the formation. He was slightly relieved. Before the formation was completed, if it was exposed in advance, Yuxiao would definitely stop it. However, now that it was completed, on the contrary, there would be a period of peace. Before the Jade Sky sect was fully prepared, they would have a period of peace. They wouldn't rashly attack them. He said, fellow Taoist Li, you can stop now. Let's see what Yuxiao will do next. When Li Xiaomi heard this, she ordered the clam worm to retract the clam qi. After creating the illusion for several days, the worm was already exhausted. Since it could still be of great use in battle, she let it rest in peace. Mi Jinren gently flicked his sleeves at this moment, and a strong wind rolled up on the surface of the sea. It was wrapped in infinite saber qi. With just a rush, the few cultivators who were guarding here and the flying boat were smashed into pieces. The whole process was like wiping away ants. As soon as the illusion was removed, a large formation that covered an area of 10,000 miles was revealed. Due to the gathering of qi from all directions, it was far stronger than when it was blocked by the illusion. Therefore, many of the guarding sects on the Fengling Ocean immediately sensed it. In an instant, dozens of flying letters flew up from here and rushed to the South Cliff continent. Just now, not long after Zhou Ruiying returned, she received a flying letter warning. She was instantly shocked and angry. With a leap, she came to the high sky. Looking up, she saw tens of thousands of miles of silver light spread over the sea. The clear air waved high up, and the spiritual vigor connected the sky and the earth. It was obviously a carefully arranged forbidden formation, and the location was obviously the place where she had checked before. She immediately knew that she had been deceived. She couldn't help but clench her fists tightly. She was also very embarrassed, and at the same time, there was a trace of nervousness. Since the last time Tao Jinhong and the other two were chased away, the Fengling Ocean was handed over to her to guard. However, she moved the sect and guarded it strictly. She never expected that they would actually set up a large formation on the South Sea. If her fellow sect members knew that she did not guard well, she didn't know how she would be punished. After hesitating for a while, she took out a spell, and there was lightning around her body. Her figure flickered, and finally she suddenly disappeared. She had returned to the Heart Enlightenment Cave of the Defense Sect. She hurried to a stone residence and waved her sleeves. The two white-haired Daoren in the room saw that her expression was not right, so they didn't dare to say a word. They bowed and left. She walked to the front of the jade disc and pointed with her finger. Light and shadows flashed on the 8 jade pillars in front of her. There were 5 on the left and 3 on the right, a total of 8 perfected grotto heavens. On the left, there were the 5 halls of the Zhou family grotto heavens, namely Kangjing, Bai Bai, Yuan Shi, Su Heng, and Upper Ginseng. On the right, there were the 3 peak masters of the Wu family, namely Hui Yang, Jing Xing, and Gaoming. It was obvious that the Yuxiao sect already knew the reason. The second perfected Bai Bai said, "Hall Master Xen Ming, do you have anything to say about the South Sea?" Zhou Ruiying secretly gritted her teeth and lowered her head. "This time, it's my fault. I'm willing to accept the sect's punishment." Perfected Bai Bai snorted and said, "This matter has already happened. What's the use of punishing you?" At that moment, the fourth perfected Su Heng said, "Uncle Master, according to what I know, when there was movement in the South Sea, Hall Master Xen Ming had taken the initiative to check the sea. However, he didn't find any clues. It can be seen that the other party's methods are brilliant. It's not Hall Master Xen Ming's fault." At this point, he raised his voice slightly. "Perfected ones, don't forget that Tao Jinhong and the rest have the Qinsong school behind them. If they want to hide it, it's not difficult for them to make a fuss in a place where Yu Xiao's power can't reach." Jinren Kangjing said in a deep voice, "Hall Master Xen Ming's matter is not important. We can talk about it later. We can talk about the South Sea first." As soon as he said that, the place fell silent. The people of the grotto heavens on both sides bowed and agreed. Perfected Su Heng said, "When there was a movement in the South Sea, I used the Celestial Palace mirror to check it out. That formation was grand and it covered a wide area. It's not something that can be done in a few years. I don't know how they set it up." Zhou Ruiying couldn't help but say, "That might not be a formation." Everyone looked over and Perfected Bai Bai said in a deep voice, "Hall Master Xen Ming, what do you mean by that?" Zhou Ruiying composed himself and told him about his experience at the sea. Half of it was to excuse himself, and the other half was to explain the reason. At that time, I couldn't see through that flaw. After thinking about it, they should have used some sort of illusion technique. However, if they had such a brilliant divine ability, they wouldn't be able to see through it. However, if they have such a brilliant divine power, it's not impossible to create a formation to make me retreat. Wu Riyang said calmly, "Actually, it's easy to find out. We can just attack them when we get a treasure. If they are really bluffing, we can just wipe them out like last time." Jinren Kangjing said, "Perfected Wu's words make sense." Zhou Ruiying saw him raise his hand lightly. After a while, he heard a rumble coming from the high clouds in the sky, and it went straight to the South Sea. Tao Jinren was adjusting his qi. Suddenly, he felt a sense of danger and looked up. He saw the high clouds in the sky shatter, and a green light with a majestic aura. It shot straight towards the formation. He immediately mobilized some formation power in his hands to be prepared. There was a loud rumble. The green light collided with the formation. However, other than stirring up the surrounding seawater, the entire formation was different. Even the formation qi didn't decrease much. The green light didn't stop there. It attacked a few more places, but it didn't gain any advantage. Not long after, it turned around and flew back. Mi Jinren frowned. Is Yu Xiao school testing us? Tao Jinren smiled. They probably don't believe that we are able to connect this land vein. Maybe they think that I am purposely setting up a formation, so they came to verify it. His gaze looked towards the depths of the distant sky as he said, exactly how the Jade Sky sect will make a decision will be known in the next 1 or 2 days. We'll just have to wait and see. After the perfected ones of Yu Xiao school waited for a long time, Jinren Kongjing finally said slowly, just now, I have tested the formation with the green golden thorn in my hand. This formation is connected to the earth vein. There is a formation base below and a formation plate above. It is only a little lacking compared to an ordinary sect guarding formation. Moreover, there is one place that you need to pay attention to. Although it tried its best to cover it up, I could still tell that there was a fresh and flourishing aura within the formation that I had never seen before. Tao and me are not the only ones suppressing the formation. Wu Ruyang said, I wonder who the last person is? Jinren Kongjing said, although the qi is upright, it has not shed its demonic nature. It should not be the achievement of a human. It is very likely to be that Li Xiaomi. I didn't expect that we did not stop him from achieving, but now he has become successful. Everyone could not help but furrow their brows. To take down such a strong formation, the difficulty was no less than attacking a sect's formation, especially when there were 3 grotto heavens in it. To break it unless the entire Yu Xiao school came out. But don't forget that the other party still had the Dragon Palace to teleport. If he saw that the situation was not good, he could retreat. They could not stop him at all. The most troublesome thing was that even so, he could still come back after a few decades. Would they have to expel him again? Then Jade Heaven sect from top to bottom would really be implicated here. Perfected Su Heng thought for a moment, bowed and said, I have a few words. Maybe I have not thought it through, I don't know if I should say it. Jinren Kongjing raised his hand and said, this matter now is the time for us to brainstorm. You can tell me about it. Taoist Su Heng bowed and said, this nephew thinks that Tao Jinhong and the others have made a comeback after 60 years, so they've prepared all sorts of methods. If we make a move hastily, we'll probably fall right into their trap. Jinren Kongjing said in a low voice, that makes sense. Continue. Perfected Su Heng continued, however, the situation this time is different from the previous time. Previously, there was no barrier between the Fengling Ocean and the South Cliff Continent. Once their mana was used, they could threaten the foundation of our sect. Thus, we had to expel them. However, this time, they are building a formation on the South Sea. I think that we can use the Fengling Ocean as a base to set up the altar. Then, we can send perfected ones from the sect to defend against the enemies outside. Jinren Kongjing said, you want to turn offense into defense and lure the enemy out of their nest. That's a good idea. Perfected Su Heng bowed and said, Uncle Master's eyes are sharp. That is exactly what I mean. Everyone present nodded in agreement. The formation and the South Cliff Continent were separated by the Fengling Ocean. As long as the altar was built on the Fengling Ocean, it could be used as a barrier for the South Cliff Continent. With 1 or 2 people guarding it, there was indeed no need to worry about the other party destroying the continent. If the other party saw this, they would definitely try to destroy it. However, if they only used their treasures to attack, they could destroy it one by one. If they came personally and gathered Yu Xiao's strength, it would not be difficult to take them down. If they did not dare to make a move, they could maintain the stalemate. Although this would require a portion of Yu Xiao's strength, it was still what the Qinsong school wanted. However, this was also the most appropriate way to handle the situation. Seeing that no one spoke, Kang Jing looked at Wu Riyang and said, "Perfected Wu, what do you think?" Wu Riyang said, "I have no objections. However, I wonder who is the most suitable person to guard the Fengling Ocean?" Jinren Kangjing said, "Hall Master Xinming has been negligent in his duties before. He can go and guard this place to atone for his mistakes." Zhou Ruiying did not dare to disobey and agreed. Perfected Su Heng said, "However, there are 3 people on Tao Jinhong's side. Hall Master Xinming can't handle them alone." The gazes of the Zhou family turned to the 3 perfected ones of the Wu family. After a while, Wu Riyang said slowly, "Yunbi has always been steady. He can guard this place with martial nephew Zhou." Jinren Kangjing said, "The last time we went to Mount Li, it was also the 2 of them. They did well that time. I hope that they will not disappoint the sect this time." Zhou Ruiying and Wu Yunbi sternly agreed. A few days later, Tao, Li, and the rest did not receive Yu Xiao's attack. Instead, they heard the news that he was building an altar and a formation on the Fengling Ocean. Li Xiaomi said in a low voice, "Yu Xiao is advancing by retreating. He wants to lure me out." Tao Jinren smiled faintly and said, "We will rely on this formation to build the altar and push forward. If Yu Xiao does not come out to stop us, we will go all the way to the Fengling Ocean. Let's see if he can endure it then." Li Xiaomi could not help but suck in a cold breath. Once they did that, the treasured materials needed were truly incalculable. Furthermore, the materials they used to build the Great Formation were all sent over by Yutsong sect. Doing this was safe and sound, but Jade Sky sect would definitely fight against them. In this way, it was equivalent to 2 great sects competing with each other in terms of resources. Chapter 1083. Floating Heavenly Palace, Upper Extreme Hall. Qi Yuntian sat on the main seat, while Zhang Yan and Huoxian sat on his left and right respectively. At this moment, the 3 of them were discussing the South Sea. Qi Yuntian's voice resounded in the wide hall. Yu Xiao School has already sent 2 enlightened masters to the Fengling Ocean. Junior Zhang has done a good job. Everything that is needed in the South Sea can be allocated by the sect. Qinsong School supported Tao Jinhong and the others in order to restrain Yu Xiao and make them feel threatened. After decades of hard work, this could be said to have been achieved. All that was left was to think of a way to hold on. Huoxian said in a deep voice, "According to Junior Zhang, Tao Jinren wants to build an altar on the sea to compete with Yu Xiao. Isn't this too much for the sect?" This was not a battle between ordinary cultivators, but a battle between enlightened masters. The power of this battle was earth-shattering. It was very likely that the altar that was erected with great effort would be destroyed in the blink of an eye. This kind of thing was likely to happen many times in a day, and the treasures consumed would definitely reach a shocking number. Qinsong School could have such a situation today all because of the solid foundation laid by the 4th-generation sect master who guarded the sect for 6,000 years. However, Yu Xiao School was also one of the 3 major sects after all, and its foundation was also very deep. It was definitely not to be underestimated. Qi Yuntian said, "Although the sect needs a lot of resources, it can still support it. Junior Huoxian, don't forget that Shaoqing is an ally of Qinsong. If there is a need, he has already promised to support us with all his strength. We are not afraid of exhausting Yu Xiao." Huoxian nodded and thought, if Shaoqing is willing to help, then there is no need to worry. With the strength of our 2 sects, we can firmly suppress Yu Xiao. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "In this case, the matter in the South Sea is 2 against 1. Then we just need to drag it out. The longer the time, the more advantageous it is for me. However, if Yu Xiao feels that something is wrong, he will definitely change his strategy. So, we should also show our weakness to the enemy." Qi Yuntian asked, "What's junior brother Zhang's plan?" Zhang Yan said, "The Shaoqing dynasty has a rich and populous land like the Middle Pillar continent, but the Yu Xiao School occupies the southern cliff. Although my Qinsong School is backed by the northern underworld, we have never asked for much. This time the great calamity is coming, I think there is no need to restrain the disciples of the sect. We can send them to the north. First, we can take advantage of Yu Xiao's distraction to oppress the northern underworld's demon cultivators. Second, we can also collect many spiritual treasures produced in this continent to make up for the consumption of the sect. Third, when Yu Xiao sees my actions, they will suspect that I have not used enough troops, so that they can strengthen their resolve to defend the South Sea. Hua Xian nodded and said, falsehood and falsehood, falsehood and falsehood, junior brother Zhang's plan is very good. I also have a foolish opinion. After some time, we can ask for help from Pingdu and Huanjin temples. If Yu Xiao school felt that it was difficult to support them, they would probably do the same. If he spoke to Nanhua, Tai Hao, and the other sects, he could drag these sects into this chaotic situation. However, there is one thing that we need to pay attention to. If they get angry out of humiliation, they might call their alliance to wipe out the South Sea together. Qi Yuntian thought for a moment and said, at least in the next 100 years, Yu Xiao school will not do such a humiliating thing. However, although the 2 sets of medicine are enough, I think there is no harm in adding to the fire. Zhang Yan said, may I ask, senior brother, where does the fire come from? Qi Yuntian said in a deep voice, when necessary, we can ask the northern sects to pay an additional 50 to 100% of the original amount. Zhang Yan smiled and said, once senior brother makes this move, the Yu Xiao school will definitely think that. As long as we hold on, we can definitely drag down our Qinsong school and the alliance behind us. This fire is not small. As for whether an increase of 50 to 100% of the offerings would cause many small sects to complain, they did not need to consider this at all. If it was not for the protection of Qinsong school, these small sects would have long been defeated in the previous Mystic Demon War. Especially in the next few hundred years, they did not need to fight with the demon sect anymore, so the things saved could be used to fill the whole of the South Sea War. On the Fengling High Sea, 2 flying carriages descended from the sky. It was the arrival of the 2 Grotto Heaven spiritual masters of the Jade Heaven sect. The cultivators of the dozens of sects had already heard the news, so they all gathered here to welcome them. After Zhou Ruiying got off the carriage, he was not in the mood to pay attention to them and ordered his disciples to send them away. Then he picked up a letter and held his forehead, saying, Tao Zhenhong and the others have built another formation altar outside the formation. What do you think, senior brother Wu? Wu Yunbi said in a low voice, don't worry about it. The first thing we need to do is to build a sea-linking formation in the Fengling Ocean. But speaking of this, those cultivators are already doing this and we can't do without them. Just now, junior sister Zhou can appease them a little. Why do you need to leave so quickly? Zhou Ruiying sneered and said, Yu Xiao, Yu's people, why should I care about what they think? Do you think they dare to disobey? Wu Yunbi shook her head. The Zhou clan had always been domineering and had always been high and mighty. It was indeed difficult to ask them to bow down. It seemed that she had to do it herself. Zhou Ruiying said, I want to go up to the sky to observe the formation. Senior brother Wu, do you want to come with me? Wu Yunbi nodded and said, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never lose 100 battles. I want to see what's going on. The 2 of them flew up to the sky and watched for a while. Then, Wu Yunbi said in a deep voice, in the coming days, we should guard against them destroying our formation. Zhou Ruiying said, why not attack instead of defending? Wu Yunbi shook his head. He wanted to do that, but now they didn't have the advantage in numbers. It was fine if they just defended, but if they took the initiative to fight, it was very likely that they would consume their cultivation and gain no advantage. Even if they really wanted to make a move, they should wait until the formation was repaired and there was nothing to worry about. In the South Sea formation, Tao Zhenhong and the other 2 stood on an altar. In front of them, there was a jade disc that was 30 feet tall. Because Yu Xiao had set up restrictive spells on the sea a few days ago and released many spirit birds that could hook and peck flying letters, it was very inconvenient to use this thing to travel. Therefore, they set up this psychic jade disc. As long as the Taoist master Dong Tian stayed in it, even if they were thousands of mountains and tens of thousands of rivers, they could still communicate with each other and exchange what they needed. A disciple walked forward and lit a high incense stick in front of the jade disc. following that, a dense mist rose up, and not long after, ripples appeared on the surface of the jade disc. At the same time, the entire boulder started to shake incessantly. A figure emerged from it. He had clear features and a tall figure. He stood with his hands behind his back and his black robe fluttered. Tao Jinren and the other two bowed and said, "Greetings, fellow Taoist Zhang." Zhang Yan also returned the greeting, "Greetings, fellow Taoists." Tao Jinhong said, "I wonder if your sect has a ruling on what I said before?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Fellow Taoists, the few Taoists in my sect also praised you for setting up the formation on the sea. Our Qinsong school will do our best to help you in whatever you do. As for the materials needed, there are many of them. We are still gathering them and will send someone to deliver them next month at the latest." At this point, he suddenly felt that the jade disc was shaking, as if its spiritual vigor was unstable. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Today's time is short. I'm afraid that's all I can say. Please take care of yourselves, I will take my leave first." When he finished, his figure slowly faded away. At the same time, the entire jade disc shook even more violently. When the three saw it, they all took a few steps back. After a few breaths, they heard a rumbling sound. The entire jade disc actually exploded into pieces. Li Xiaomi sighed and said helplessly, "Jinren Zhang's mana is too strong. I didn't expect this crystal jade disc to not be able to withstand his aura. We need to find another one." Tao Jinren said, "There's no rush. There are many rare treasures on the sea. There's nothing to trouble Jinren Zhang. You can just send people to search around." Mi Jinren frowned and said, "The two people from Yuxiao School are building altars on the Fengling Ocean. Are you going to sit back and watch?" Tao Jinren smiled and said, "Of course not. It's just that just now, there's some movement on the other side. We'll go and destroy it now. It won't be a big loss to Yuxiao. It's not too late to make a move when he's almost done." The three of them waited for 2 months. During these days, they sat on the altars in the formation and watched the scene on the Fengling Ocean from time to time. They had been waiting patiently for an opportunity. Seeing that the formation was almost done, they knew that if they didn't make a move now, they would miss the opportunity. The three of them looked at each other and decided to act according to the plan they discussed earlier. Tao Jinren channeled his mana. Yellow smoke gathered from all directions and turned into a big yellow hand. It was 1,000 feet wide and reached out from the formation towards the Fengling Ocean. When he moved, Zhou Ruiying and Wu Yunbi immediately sensed it. However, the two places were quite far apart. After more than 10 breaths of time, the giant hand descended on top of their heads. Before the palm could land, the severe wind barrier had actually been forcefully dispersed. Zhou Ruiying turned his wrist and flicked his finger. A thunder star pearl of Xinwei flew up to the sky and exploded the big hand in midair. But at this moment, 2 strands of saber chi broke through the sea, and the towering waves were parted by this slash. Wu Yunbi's expression was solemn. He took out a small flag and waved it. Dozens of clouds rose from the sea and blocked the way. When the saber light came over, it split the clouds apart. However, more clouds came over and entangled the saber light. Finally, when it was about to reach Feng Linghai, it was stopped. After his wall of everlasting light was taken away, his combat power was reduced by more than half. Fortunately, the sect knew of his difficulties and bestowed this 3 chaotic cloud flag to him. But after all, it was not personally refined by him, so there was always some difficulty in operating his magic power. It was not smooth, and many of its magical effects could not be used in a hurry. The big hand in the sky scattered, but under the support of the mana, it gathered again. Zhou Ruiying sneered, "Let's see how much mana you can squander." At this moment, she was on the defensive side, so she used much less mana than her opponent. However, she was not afraid of this kind of battle. At this moment, she looked around and noticed that behind the big yellow hand, there seemed to be a shadow of a green dragon. She could not help but sneer. When she attacked Feng Linghai the last time, she had seen this flood dragon. Not only did it have tough scales and sharp claws, it was also rather ferocious, and it even had the ability to repel true treasures. But this time, how could she not be prepared? As long as the flood dragon dared to charge down, she would make it impossible for it to return. Wu Yunbi frowned and looked up at the sky. Something's not right. Zhou Ruing did not dare to be careless. He quickly asked, "Senior apprentice brother, did you notice something?" Wu Yunbi's expression was solemn. He said, "Junior apprentice Sister Zhou, did you not notice that the spiritual vigor is in chaos? This is not caused by the collision of mana. It should be Tao Zhenhong and the others who deliberately messed it up. They would not do something useless. They must have set up something. We need to be careful later." Zhou Ruing felt that it was reasonable. He quickly focused and did not dare to relax. After a few breaths, the two of them suddenly saw a formation map flying from afar. This thing was inconspicuous, but when the two of them saw it, they felt an indescribable fear in their hearts. They knew that there was definitely something strange about it, and they had to eliminate it first. So they shouted in unison and used their divine abilities to attack it. This time, Zhou Ruing released hundreds of Shunwei star thunder beads. Hot flames and golden rainbows soared into the sky. The sound of wind and thunder shook the sea. His aura was unparalleled. Wu Yunbi did not hold back. She raised her hand and pointed. A red light was released. The sea 3,000 miles in front of her was instantly illuminated into a red swamp. However, when the star beads were in midair, they collided with a few slashes of saber aura and exploded. Just as the scarlet light reached the front, it also encountered a ball of gentle and clear air. Although the latter was constantly being melted and dispelled, it was no longer able to stop the formation from flying over. At this moment, a dragon roar came from above. The figure of the flood dragon in the sky rushed down. It became clearer and clearer. Zhou Ruing sneered and waved her sleeves. The sound of chains rang out and a long chain flew into the sky. This was the Southern Flower Sect's serpent-binding golden chain, and it could easily bind the soul essence of such a serpent dragon. However, when the serpent dragon saw this, its ferocious eyes were filled with ridicule. It just stretched out its claw and tore the chain apart, and then it let out a long roar before charging down without losing momentum. Zhou Ruing's expression changed. She looked again and exclaimed, "The true form of the demon flood dragon? At this time, Li Xiaomi?" That green flood dragon was released by Li Xiaomi on purpose to confuse Zhou and Wu, two people's eyes and ears. His real body took this opportunity to hide in the sky. Seeing the two people exerting their strength, he immediately scurried down from the clouds. When he was near, he swung his long tail and whipped downwards. Zhou Ruing and Wu Yunbi were fighting with Tao Ruing and Mi Ruing. They did not expect Li Xiaomi to take the risk of being surrounded and personally come out to fight. Moreover, he did not swim from the bottom of the sea but from the sky. They were caught off guard. This was the body of a real flood dragon. If they fought it head-on, they might not be able to win easily. How would they dare to let him get close to them? They immediately flew away. The flood dragon struck empty air. With a loud boom, half of the mountain collapsed, and everything within a radius of 1,000 miles became a wasteland. However, before he could do anything, he felt a sense of danger. He turned his head and saw that in the distant sky, there were several rays of light flying across the sea. In the smoke, he could vaguely see several magic treasures of different shapes. Zhou Ruing said with joy, "It's the Hall Masters. Let's see how he can escape today." Li Xiaomi did not panic. He turned back into his human body. At the same time, he made a hand sign. The array diagram that was flying over immediately turned. The sky suddenly turned dark and bright. In a blink of an eye, dozens of yin-yang origin blade rays flew out and attacked the magic treasures and Zhou Ruing and Wu Yunbi. Their expressions changed. There were so many sharp blade rays at once. Even if they could block it, they would definitely lose a lot of mana. They could only turn into a ray of light and retreat. The next moment, there was a loud bang. The entire island in the Fengling Ocean and even the altar that was erected just now were smashed into pieces by the blade aura. The biggest island was directly cut into dozens of pieces. The magic treasure in the sky also got rid of the blade aura. However, when it wanted to rush down again, the array diagram moved. Dozens of blade rays rushed out from it and blocked it halfway. Zhou Ruing and Wu Yunbi had no choice but to dodge the blade rays again. Li Xiaomi smiled and cupped his hands. "Everyone, I hope to see you again." He swayed his body and sank into the sea. At the same time, the array diagram also broke into countless pieces and fell into the sea. Chapter 1084. Wu Yunbi frowned as she looked down. All the preparations over the past few months had been in vain. The island below had been destroyed to such a state. In the future, he would need to use his mana to reform the island. However, to restore it to its original size, it would probably take several months. This meant that during this period of time, he would not be able to build a wide range of restrictive formations. He could only build a few spell altars in scattered places. This was not the most important thing. Almost half of the cultivators from dozens of sects had died in this battle. All the manpower needed to be transferred from the rear. It was conceivable that there would be countless casualties in every battle in the future. Although the power of the Southern Cliff State could temporarily support such consumption, it would be hard to say as time went on. It was highly likely that they would need to transfer manpower from the clan. If that was the case, the Zhou clan would definitely not let their own disciples risk their lives. It would only be the Wu clan, the Xie clan, or other small clans. He thought to himself, "I should send a letter to Uncle Master later to let him be prepared." Zhou Ruing's expression was not too good at the moment. It was not because the island below had been destroyed. In her eyes, this was not her home, so it was not a pity to destroy it. However, she felt that she had lost face when she was forced to retreat by a few cultivators from outside the sect that she had always looked down on. She gritted her teeth and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Wu, if the two of us attack the other side immediately, do we have a chance of winning?" Wu Yunbi was startled. She looked at the sea and said, "Junior Marshal Sister Zhou, are you going to catch them off guard? I don't think it's appropriate. Look at the aura in front, it's steady and not chaotic. Tao Zhenhong and Mi Xiaonan are still on guard, especially with the Great Protective Formation. Even if we have many powerful moves that we haven't used, we don't have much chance of winning if we attack now." Zhou Ruin calmed down and sighed. "I misspoke." Wu Yunbi said, "Junior Marshal Sister Zhou, there's no need to be depressed. This is just a small setback. This is a long-term battle, there's no need to fight for a moment. Now that we have no burdens, we can keep an eye on them every day and they won't build the formation." Zhou Ruing looked across and nodded. "That's right, we're here. It's just to stop these people from advancing north. As long as we can kill them, it won't be considered a loss." At this moment, on the other side, Li Xiaomi came up from the bottom of the sea and stepped on the waves to return to the array. Tao Zhenren laughed and said, "This time it was Yu Xiao's arrangement that was ruined. Fellow Taoist Li deserves the most credit." Li Xiaomi replied, "You're flattering me, fellow Taoist." If we're talking about the technique of turning back the head, it's none other than Mi Zhenren. If it weren't for her 99 streaks of Yin-Yang Elysium Blade Qi, not to mention breaking the formation, I'm afraid it would be difficult for me to return. It's a pity that this method can only be used once. Next time, I'll have to find another better plan. The formation had been refined in preparation for the big battle. If they didn't use it, after a year and a half. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to use it this time. However, this was the result of using Mi Zhenren's effort in the past year to exchange for today's situation. Even if Mi Zhenren was willing to put in more effort, Jade Cloud sect would be prepared next time and would never make the same mistake again. Mi Zhenren said, "Fellow Taoist Tao, what should we do next?" Tao Zhenren smiled faintly and said, "Of course we'll switch from offense to defense. If I activate the formation outside the formation, the other two will definitely come and destroy it. If we plan it well, we can use this chance to wear them down." Li Xiaomi nodded and thought, "Then we'll have to plan again." North Nether Continent, Shonyan Mountain. Two cloud rafts slowly landed on the peak of the mountain and waited for them to land. Thousands of Yao cultivators swarmed up. The leader, Daoren, bowed and said, "Jin River Chief Wang Su, along with the elders of Jin River, greets High Sect Spiritual Master Wang and Spiritual Master Fu. Wang Kaiwei and Fu Baoxing got off the cloud rafts together. Behind them were the hundreds of Zhao Yu disciples who participated in the attack on the North Nether Demon tribe. Wang Caiwei's gaze landed on Daoren and said, "You are Wang Su?" Wang Su respectfully replied, "Yes, I am." Wang Kaiwei nodded lightly. She said, "A few days ago, you said that your life is coming to an end and that your son should take over as the chief Jin River chief. The sect has already approved of this. After this matter is over, there will be an imperial decree. Remember to use your life well." Wang Su was very emotional when he heard this. His face flushed red and he knelt down and kowtowed, "I thank High Sect for your great kindness." After he knelt down, the elders below also came up to pay their respects. Currently, most of the demon tribe disciples on both sides of Jin River were under Wei Zihong's tutelage. They cultivated in Qingtong Mountain and were deeply involved with each other. He had long seen himself as a pawn of the Zhao Yu sect and had completely switched sides. At this moment, there was a sudden burst of spiritual light in the sky and clouds were overflowing. Then there was a strange sound. 10 chariots flew over from the south. The one at the front was a great Wei cloud tower and the 9 behind were stellar flying palaces. The palaces soon arrived at the top of Drum Collapse Mountain. They paused for a while in the sky before landing one after another. With a glance, everyone knew that the top 10 disciples of Qinsong School had arrived. Because in the next few hundred years, there would be no more battle of Xian demons or sword duels between the sections. Therefore, if the top 10 disciples did not have any merits, it would be almost impossible for them to enter the third high hall to cultivate in the future. However, this was a rare opportunity to attack the North Nether continent. Therefore they were all here. In fact, the Qinsong school respected the ancestral master's order to leave the North Nether continent demon cultivators alive. First, it was to train the disciples, and second, it was so that they would not be left without merits. Not long after the 10 chariots landed, a cultivator in plain white robes came out of the chariots. Stepping on light smoke, he arrived in front of Wang and Fu, bowed and said, "Taoist Wang, Taoist Fu, Senior Martial Brother Yen will be hosting a banquet in Mount Guchui to entertain the chiefs of the various tribes. I hope the 2 Taoists will come." Wang Kaiwei nodded and said, "Got it. Thank you, Master Yen." This Master Yen was called Yen Buxiao. He was the current leader of the top 10 disciples. He came from the famous cave and was also a direct descendant of the Yen clan. Since he came to invite them, they had to give him face. Ning pouted at the side and said, "We're here to eliminate demons, not to go on a spring outing. Why do we need to hold a banquet? We're indulging in pleasure." No wonder Senior Sister Yi said that those people from the aristocratic families are not good people. Wang Kaiwei frowned and scolded, "Ning, what nonsense are you talking about? Master Yen naturally has his reasons for doing this. When we go to the banquet later, don't say such things again. Otherwise, I will definitely punish you heavily." Ning shrunk her head and said, "Got it, Master." Fu Baoxing smiled and said, "Martial Nephew Zhu, your master and I will be returning in a few days. The specific matters of eliminating demons will be handled by this Master Yen. Our Zhao Yu sect is also under his command and name. You don't have to offend him." Zhu Ning was not convinced and said, "Martial uncle is looking down on me. Martial nephew is not afraid of him." Wang Kaiwei shook her head. This disciple of hers had cultivated steadily under the protection of her fellow sect members and masters. She had never encountered any setbacks. This time, it was time to make him suffer. In the southwest of East Flower, a cloud of smoke that was hard to be seen by the naked eye flew over from the sky and then fell into a deep valley. Hui Xiao walked out of the smoke with a tired face. She tried her best to raise her spirits and identify the direction. Then, she leaped into the smoke and traveled westward for a few days. She came to the front of a bottomless sinkhole and leaped without hesitation, turning into a cloud of black smoke and heading inside. After traveling for a few days, she landed on a platform. There was a rough stone door in front of her, and the cave walls on both sides were polished until they were unusually smooth. There were ferocious demons chiseled on them. She took out a talisman and waved it, and a demon flew out from the cave wall. It circled around her a few times, as if it was smelling her scent. After confirming that there was nothing unusual, it turned into a cloud of black smoke and returned to its original place. At this moment, the stone door rumbled open, and Hui Xiao stepped in. She walked down a long ravine, and after making a few turns, she arrived before a waterfall. Without any hesitation, she stepped into the waterfall. The scenery in front of her changed, and she was already inside a stone cave that was decorated with pearls everywhere. 2 servant girls came forward and said, "Greetings, great pavilion master." Hui Xiao glanced at the surroundings and said, "Where's that junior sister of mine?" One of the servant girls answered, "Second pavilion master came back yesterday just now. It seems that this trip was not smooth, and she is now cultivating in the Wenyang cave. Do you need me to call her?" Hui Xiao thought for a moment and said, "No need. I will go visit teacher first, and I will go find her tomorrow." She waved the servant girls away. She turned into the side hall alone and pushed open the door at the back of the hall. She saw a dark river flowing in front of her. Although the water was rippling, there was no sound of water. There were no boats here, only 2 stone lotuses floating on the water. She stepped on one of the stone lotuses, took out a spell, and slowly floated to the other side. The waterway here was a weak water forbidden formation. The surface of the river was less than 6 feet wide, but the bottom couldn't be seen. If one's cultivation wasn't good enough, they would have to step on the stone lotuses. Otherwise, if they came into contact with 1 or 2 water droplets, they would immediately sink and not be able to get out. Very soon, they reached the end of the stone lotus. Hui Xiao came ashore and walked a few dozen steps. With a turn of her body, she came to an empty cavern hall. There was a huge palace cauldron here. She knelt down and said, "Disciple Hui Xiao greets master." The palace cauldron shook, and a devil flew out. With a flash, it turned into Sima Quan. He hung above and said, "Oh, you're back. Did you go out of Void Sky smoothly?" Hui Xiao lowered her head and said, "With the protection of teacher's mana, disciple didn't encounter any obstacles in going up and down Void Sky. However, when I went to Outer Heaven Cauldron Palace, I realized that people's hearts are very unstable." Sima Quan snorted and said, "That's to be expected." Although Wang Kaiwei and Fu Baoxing led Zhao Yu sect to destroy 5 palace cauldrons, he was prepared. The disciple hidden in the last palace cauldron, no matter if it was cultivation or skills, was a level higher than the other cauldrons. The 6 demon bugs scattered among the various sects were also controlled by him. He could be considered the last bloodline of the Dark Celestial Palace. However, in these few years, Sima Quan had disappeared without a trace. There was also no news of the other palace cauldrons, and the number of external medicine deliveries had also decreased. Some quick-witted people had already vaguely guessed something, and several times found excuses to go to East Flower to inquire about news. If it wasn't for the 3rd disciple Yu Xiao suppressing them with his cultivation, they would probably have made a move long ago. Hui Xiao hesitated slightly before saying, "Even though junior apprentice brother Yu Xiao is exhausted in meditation, his cultivation is only at the 1st Yuaning realm. From what I know, there are 2 cultivators from the Devil sect who are getting stronger and stronger with the help of the 6 demon bugs. At most, in another 10 years or so, they will be able to enter the Yuaning realm. At that time, they will definitely not be willing to be restrained by junior apprentice brother. Why doesn't teacher try to suppress them?" Sima Quan snorted and said, "Other sects all hope that the higher the cultivation of their disciples, the better. But here, it's the other way around." Hui Xiao hurriedly kowtowed and said, "It's disciples' incompetence, I can't share teacher's burden." Sima Quan said, "It's none of your business. At the end of the day, it's still because the sect lacks a person with profound cultivation to hold the fort." Then he smiled strangely and said, "But there's no need to worry. I have already found a suitable candidate." Hui Xiao was a little confused. She thought about it a few times, but found that there was no suitable person in the palace. The person with the best aptitude she had seen was none other than Feng Xin. But now, he was only at the core transformation realm. If he wanted to cultivate to a realm where he could suppress all the other cultivators, it would be at least a few hundred years later. As for the third disciple Yu Xiao, his aptitude was really ordinary. It was only because he had joined the sect early and his own cultivation was enough that he could replace Sima Quan in leading the sect. As for the other disciples, it was even more impossible. So she tried asking, "May I know which fellow disciple teacher has taken a liking to?" Sima Quan snorted and said, "Why is it not someone from my palace? This kind of person can be found from other sections. They are people who have cultivated the Yuanying Dharma body. If I can plant demonic qi in them, they can be used by me in the end." However, when a cultivator reached the 3 stages of Yuanying, their Tao heart was usually firm, and they did not have too big of a flaw. Moreover, the seniors of the sect behind them would be able to eliminate any hidden dangers in time if they saw something was wrong. So he had to find someone who had no one to take care of and whose Tao heart had not been sharpened. Logically speaking, this kind of person was very hard to find, but there just happened to be one in the Donghua continent. Hui Xiao asked, "May I know who teacher is looking for? Do you need disciples' help?" Sima Quan pointed at his own forehead, and a talisman flew out and entered the center of Hui Xiao's brows. He said, "You'll know when you see it." Hui Xiao instantly felt a divine will enter her sea of consciousness. When she woke up, she exclaimed in a low voice, "Ming Huapeng of the Lishan sect?" Sima Quan said, "That's right. Jinren Yuling ascended to another realm decades ago, and this female senior apprentice sister, Shen Zixin, succeeded as sect master. However, the good times did not last long. The remnants of the Shiha sect went against Lishan everywhere, and this woman was busy quelling the chaos everywhere. But at this time, Ming Huaping ignored the advice of her fellow disciples and went to Yu Xiao to cultivate. Rumor has it that her cultivation improved by leaps and bounds, and she has already caught up to Shen Zixin." Hui Xiao said thoughtfully, "Teacher, could it be that Yu Xiao school wants to use this woman to seize the authority of Lishan?" Sima Quan nodded and said, "You are right. Yu Xiao school is indeed planning to do so." Hui Xiao said worriedly, "Then this woman is extremely useful to Yu Xiao school. I'm afraid it won't be easy to make a move." Sima Quan laughed heartily and said, "Disciple is wrong. A few days ago, Tao Zhenhong was fighting on the sea, and Zhou Ruiying, who was in charge of the secular affairs of Yu Xiao sect, had no choice but to rush over. I'm afraid the two are still in a stalemate, and during this period of time, there is no one to protect Ming Huaping. This is the best time for teacher to make a move." Hui Xiao said, "Teacher's strength has not recovered. It won't be easy to subdue this woman." Sima Quan said, "Don't worry. Disciple, do you still remember the mutual possession technique that I taught you and your sister? Even though I haven't recovered my powers yet, I can still lend you a hand and take over this woman's body. Even if you can't become a grotto heaven in the future, it will be enough to protect the sect." Chapter 1085. After Sima Quan finished explaining his plan, he saw a hint of worry between Hui Zhao's brows. He snorted and said, "Disciple, are you afraid that Yu Xiao school will cause trouble after this? Or that Li Mountain sect will cause trouble for me?" Hui Xiao raised her head and said, "Master, please understand. Disciple does have this worry. Mysterious In Sky Palace is plagued by internal and external troubles. Without Master's support, under the siege of the spiritual gate, the 6 In demon bugs can only absorb spiritual opportunity in the small spiritual caves. If we provoke another strong enemy," Sima Quan laughed and said, "Disciple, you are worrying too much. If this matter succeeds, the Jade Heaven sect will definitely not muster a large force for a useless Li Mountain disciple. As for the Li Mountain sect that Ming Huaping came from, the Jade Tomb Patriarch has long since ascended. Shen Zixin herself is only at the 3rd level of the nascent soul realm. How would she have the ability to find trouble with me, Sima Quan?" Hui Xiao thought about it and felt that it was reasonable. She relaxed a little and said, "Then what should I do?" Sima Quan's expression darkened and said, There is one thing I need you to do. If Ming Huaping always hides in Yuxiao school and refuses to show herself, it will be hard for me to make a move. According to what I know, Shen Zixin has long had the intention to summon this girl back. It is just that she cares about her fellow disciples and is afraid that people will say that she is a sect leader who obstructs her fellow disciples from cultivating. That is why she has not made a move. But you can try to find some trouble for her. When she feels that she can't handle it, she will definitely try to summon Ming Huaping back to help. During this period of time, it will be the best time for me to make a move. Female. Hui Xiao said, disciple will do it immediately. Sima Quan said, hold on. Just now, you said that there are 2 people in the palace who have advanced faster and their minds are unstable. Since that is the case, there is no need to suppress them. Later, let your junior sister go to Sky Void again and order Yu Xiao to send these 2 to me. I have my own arrangements. Hui Xiao acknowledged and bowed, then retreated out of the cave. In the North Darkland continent, 2 rays of light were traveling quickly on the vast land. After traveling for about 1,000 miles, they saw a 10,000 feet cliff appear in front of them. One of the rays of light took the lead and landed on the top of the cliff. The light receded and Yuan Zhangqing walked out. After confirming that there was no danger, Zhang Xian retracted his sharp gaze. Dozens of years ago, he went north to Zhaoyu alone to seek refuge with his sect. But because of his unique identity, he did not want to waste too much time on the pill shell, so he usually only cultivated in the cave. Among the 3rd and 4th generation disciples, except for a few people, the others didn't know his true origins. They only thought he was a wandering cultivator who had a good relationship with a master in the sect. He was from the Donglai continent. Ever since he was young, he had heard that demons were wreaking havoc in the world, so he especially hated them. This time when he heard that the Qinsong school was going to attack the North Underworld, he had also requested to come here, willing to join the Zhaoyu disciples in the fight. This time, he had come out under orders, to investigate if the land beneath his feet was suitable for the Qinsong disciples to garrison. Only a few breaths had passed. The streak of light behind him had also arrived, and its radiance spread out. A young girl came out. It was Wang Caiwei's youngest disciple, Zhu Ning. She complained, "Little martial aunt, why did you leave your martial nephew behind?" Yuan Zhangqing had just now arrived first, just to prevent the 2 of them from being in danger at the same time, but he didn't have the mood to explain. He pointed at the surroundings and said, "This is the beheading snake cliff that the sect talked about?" Ever since Zhu Ning entered Dao, she had only cultivated in the Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake and had never entered the mortal world, so she was still straightforward and naive. Hearing this question, she immediately forgot the little grievance just now had, and became excited. "Yes, I heard that this was a place where the 5th generation sect leader stayed when he went to attack the North Underworld. It was originally a snake cave, and there were a total of 70 to 80 mysterious snakes that were more than 1,000 years old, and the one with the highest cultivation level was said to be close to 10,000 years old. He could fight against the people of the heavenly abode, but he was later killed by our sect's spiritual master at the bottom of the cliff, making this place famous." She lifted the hem of her skirt and walked 2 steps, sticking out her head and looked down as if she was probing. Suddenly, she let out a low cry and pointed to a place, saying excitedly, "Martial uncle, look, the bottom of the cliff is where the old snake's bones are." Yuan Zhangqing walked over steadily, and his gaze fell down. Indeed, there was a long white bone that was stacked up at the bottom of the cliff. It was basically complete from head to tail, but it was broken into hundreds of pieces. The name of beheading snake was indeed appropriate. At this time, he suddenly thought of something and asked, "I heard that the demon cultivators here mostly use the bones and blood of great demons to cultivate. There is a demon snake's remains here, why didn't they take it?" Zhu Ning put her finger on her lower lip and thought for a while, then shook her head and said, "I don't know, maybe they are afraid of the remaining power of the Qinsong." Yuan Zhangqing, on the other hand, scoffed coldly. What remaining power? He heard that after the civil strife in the Qinsong, even the 3 lakes were occupied by the demon cultivators for a short period of time, How could they be able to intimidate the demon cultivators in the North Underworld continent? There must be a reason for this place to be like this. Thinking of this, he suddenly saw a glimmer of light from the corner of his eyes, and he immediately jumped down to the bottom of the cliff. His gaze turned around, and he saw a deep cave about 10 feet high behind the giant skeleton. The light came from the cave. Zhuning also followed in. She looked around curiously and said, "So there is such a place under the cliff?" Yuan Zhangqing, on the other hand, looked straight ahead, and there was a shining magic sword stabbed diagonally on a 3 feet high stone platform. Just now, the light came from the reflection of the sunlight falling on the body of the sword. He pondered for a while and walked to the platform. Suddenly, he saw a line of clear small words on the side of the sword. It said, "The name of the sword is Sun Wheel. I used this to behead the snake, but it was contaminated by the snake's blood and poison. Its spirituality has dissipated, and it can no longer become a real treasure. Therefore I threw it here. If the younger generation disciples are fated, you can take it and use it." His gaze moved back, and the words, "Du Shenchuan," were signed. Zhu Ning came up to take a look, and said, "It's Zhenren Du." Yuan Zhangqing only had a rough understanding of the past of Qinsong School. After asking, he found out that Du Shenchuan was also one of the 12 paradises that attacked the North Underworld. He sensed carefully and said, "Since it belongs to our sect, I should take it." He took a step forward and reached out to hold the hilt of the sword. He gently pulled it out, and it was in his body. The body of the sword vibrated, and it made a long sword chime that spread far away. The dust in this place was stirred up. He raised his finger and stroked it and said, "Not bad." Although this sword had lost its spirituality, it was refined by Zhenren Du as a real treasure after all. After thousands of years, it still shone brightly, and its sharpness did not diminish. Especially outside the sword, there was an invisible evil power, as if it was extremely thirsty for demon blood. No wonder there were no demons around. It must be because this sword was here to suppress them. Zhu Ning said enviously, "Little Uncle Master's luck is really good. But Uncle Master, you have to hide it carefully." Yuan Zhangqing looked at her and said, "Why is that?" Zhu Ning said, "This sword was left by Zhenren Du. That descendant of the Du family can say that it belongs to his family. If he sees it later, he will very likely ask Uncle Master for it." Yuan Zhangqing did not care at all and said, "It's okay." He was not good at using swords. If the Du family was willing to exchange for it with sufficient cultivation items, he would be very willing. He was also very willing to take it out. Who knows, he might even be able to form a good relationship with them. As for forcefully demanding it, other people might be afraid, but he was a second-generation disciple of Zhao Yu sect. How would the Du family dare to touch him? He sat down and said, "I'm going to sacrifice to refine this sword. Please protect me, martial nephew." Since Zhu Ning entered Dao, she had never protected anyone. Hearing this, her eyes brightened and she said excitedly, "Little Uncle Master, don't worry. I will definitely protect you." Yuan Zhangqing nodded and placed the sword across his knees. He forced out a wisp of blood essence and smeared it on the sword. It faded in a moment, and he entered a spell. This sword did not have any true consciousness, so there was no need for spirit fusion. He only needed to enter the mark of blood essence. However, after 2 hours, he finished the sacrificial refining. So he kept the sword and stood up. Just as he was about to leave the cave, he felt a strange feeling in his heart. He frowned unconsciously. He stopped in his tracks. Zhu Ning suddenly exclaimed, "Little Uncle Master, there's a big demon coming from the sky." Yuan Zhangqing looked at her in surprise, and then nodded. He cultivated the sensory nerve, and he was gifted. His spiritual vigor was far better than his peers. Zhu Ning was not much weaker than him, so it was no wonder that Wang Kaiwei valued her so much. He transmitted his voice, "Restrain your qi dynamic, don't make a sound." Zhu Ning nodded nervously. She could feel that the other party's strength was unusually strong, and he could probably kill the two of them with just a breath. So she took out a talisman from her sachet. This was a protective talisman given by the sect, and it could protect her for a while. However, this talisman was not easy to make, and she was not willing to use it unless she had no way to escape. After about 10 breaths, the strong chi dynamic finally subsided. She patted her chest and heaved a sigh of relief. She said, "That big demon must be at the 4th level of the turning strength realm, and its chi dynamic is majestic like the waves of the sea. The direction it's heading seems to be where my fellow disciples of Qinsong are. Could it be to cause trouble?" Yuan Zhangqing said indifferently, "Martial nephew, you're worrying too much. There are 3 Zenrins from our sect who have cultivated Dharmakaya guarding the mountain. Why would they be afraid of a big demon at the 4th level of the turning strength realm? If it really goes there, it's just seeking its own death." Zhu Ning's eyes turned, and she suddenly revealed a look of excitement. She said, "Little martial uncle, 3,000 miles ahead is the Kang." According to Chief Wang Su, the Wudu tribe is the strongest there, and their leader, Fu Luan, is a demon who has long cultivated to the 4th level of the turning strength realm. I heard that he is stronger than Zhu Bogeo, who fought with Grandmaster years ago. Just now, the one going there must be this demon. Why don't we take advantage of his absence and try our luck in his tribe? The North Darkstar continent was vast, more than a few times larger than the Donghua continent. There were 3 great rivers in the continent, namely the Ji River, the Jin River, and the Kang River. Some of the more powerful demon tribes had taken root near the banks of the rivers. The tribes of the Kang River were the next targets that the Qinsong school was going to subdue. Yuan Zhangqing changed his mind, but he said, "This kind of demon tribe, not to mention the elders whose cultivation is unknown, even the demon generals whose cultivation is comparable to mine are more than 100. It's not something we can easily provoke." Zhu Ning pursed her lips and said, "Little martial uncle, what are you afraid of? I heard that the Wudu tribe's pi bears are heavy and stupid, and their escape techniques are terrible. How can they catch up to the 2 of us? If things don't look good, we can just retreat." Yuan Zhangqing, however, said calmly, "It's not that simple. This is a matter of life and death. How can we act on impulse? However, the Wudu tribe leader is not here, and there is no one in the tribe. We can ask fellow Taoist of the Yuan tribe to go and investigate." When he was a Taoist master that followed the army in the Donglai continent, every time before the soldiers moved out, there would be scouts to investigate the details. If the details were not clear, they would not rashly go into battle. That would only add to the casualties of the soldiers, and there would be no benefit. With a shake of his hand, he released a talisman and threw it in the direction of the Tsangshui River. Inside this talisman was the refined soul of a water demon, and it was very good at gathering information. Even if it was discovered, it would immediately disperse without leaving any traces. Wang Ning asked, "Little martial uncle, what should I do later?" Yuan Zhangqing said, "Wait." Then, he sat down on the spot to regulate his breathing and ignored her. Zhu Ning pursed her lips and said, "All right." She felt that this little martial uncle's temperament was old-fashioned and cold, and very boring. However, with their seniority, she did not dare to be presumptuous. After waiting for more than an hour, a spiritual light suddenly appeared. After Yuan Zhangqing caught it and looked at it, he passed it to Zhu Ning. When the latter saw it, her pretty face also turned pale. It turned out that Wudu tribe knew that Qinsong school did not come with good intentions, so they invited the tribes of the 4 directions to help. At this moment, there were actually 2 great demons with the strength of 4th rank in that tribe. If they crashed into them, they would definitely not be able to return. Yuan Zhangqing said, "Since we have already investigated the situation here, we should go back and report." He turned around and flew back the way he came. Zhu Ning sighed and said, "Little martial uncle, wait for me." Then she also flew up and chased after him. When Qinsong school was pressing towards northern darkness continent on a large scale, in the southeastern and southern lands, an exquisite painted pleasure boat came out of Yuxiao school and slowly headed west. Ming Huaping sat in a warm room and stroked the strings of the zither. The melody was long and mournful, as if it was her state of mind. This time, she was summoned by Shinzishin to return and help the sect to suppress the remnants of West River. According to the rules of Li Mountain sect, if a disciple did not obey the sect master's orders, they would be expelled from the sect immediately. Now that Zhou Ruiying was trapped in the Southern Sea, there was no one to cover for her, so she definitely did not dare to disobey. In fact, when she heard that Shinzishin was busy running around for the sect all day long, while her own family was cultivating outside with a clear conscience, she felt quite uncomfortable in her heart. To be able to cultivate in the heavenly paradise of Yuxiao School, in the eyes of outsiders, was a fortuitous encounter, but she was after all not a disciple of Yuxiao. Although the Zhou clan was still polite on the surface, they did not really care about her in private. As for her Dao companion Zhou Junyi, although his bearing and appearance were good, and his cultivation was not much weaker than hers, the two of them were originally connected by marriage between two sects and did not have much entanglement in love. Usually, when they met, they treated each other with respect, only exchanging a few words of greeting before saying nothing more. Even when they cultivated, they were still separated, meeting only 2 or 3 times a month. After all these years in Yuxiao, she did not even know the temperament and preferences of her husband in name. Thinking about this, she sighed faintly and plucked a few more melancholy notes with her fingers. After traveling on the gaily painted boat for a few days, her mood gradually calmed down. She had already decided in her heart that when she returned to the sect, she would help her senior sister Shinzishin to make up for the debt in her heart. At this moment, the gaily painted boat suddenly shook, swaying back and forth. She reached out and pressed down, using her mana to stabilize it. She frowned and asked, "What happened outside?" A maidservant ran in a panic, crying, "Wife, outside, there are a lot of strange things outside." Ming Huaping lifted the curtain to take a look, and her heart sank. Outside the gaily painted boat, there were thousands of demons advancing wave after wave, continuously colliding with the surrounding prohibitions, removing the filth layer by layer. Chapter 1086. After Ming Huaping saw these demons, her first reaction was that this was a plot by the cultivators of the Devil's Doctrine against the Li Mountain sect. This guess was not without reason. She was the only person in the Li Mountain sect who had cultivated a Dharmakaya other than the sect master. Furthermore, the sect still relied on her and Yu Xiao to maintain the connection. If she died here, it would be a heavy blow to the Li Mountain sect. Although her mind was racing, the devil was extremely savage and was constantly destroying the restrictions on the boat, so she didn't have time to think too much. She opened her hand, and countless petals flew out from between her fingertips. The petals filled the air, and for a moment, the jasper flowers scattered, and the fragrance assailed her nostrils. Whenever the devil outside came into contact with them, they would vanish into thin air, and an opening appeared in the shadows that filled her eyes. She flicked her fingers again, and a spiritual light flew out, disappearing in the blink of an eye. This was to go to Yuxiao School to get a help talisman, but she did not know if the cultivators of Yuxiao School would rush over after receiving it, so she did not have much hope for it. As for the Li Mountain sect's help talisman, she had it with her, but she suspected that it was a trick, so she did not plan to release it. She raised her fingers and plucked the strings on the table. There were clanging sounds, and a few rapid notes came out. The demons that were trapped at the periphery were shaken, and one by one, they actually dispersed. The few miles around the boat instantly cleared up. However, there was not a hint of relaxation on her face. If the other party really wanted to take her life, then the arrangements would not be so simple. As expected, in a short while, countless demons actually leaped out from the void. During the battle of the mystic demons back then, Ming Huaping had fought a few times, so she knew that the more it was at this time, the more she could not panic. She tried her best to maintain her composure, and her fingers continued to pluck on the strings of the instrument. However, even though the demons were continuously dispersed, they would reform each time, and she could not truly destroy them. Instead, the restrictions on the boat were getting dirtier, and at this moment, it was already on the verge of collapse. In her senses, she still did not know where the true owner was. Either the enemy's cultivation was brilliant, and they were adept at hiding, or their true body was still hiding and watching from afar. The one who came did not come up to fight me. It's very likely that he's weaker than me, so he's planning to use this demon to exhaust my magic power. His thoughts changed. Fighting the demon here was not a wise move. He had to abandon the pleasure boat and break out of the encirclement, luring the person who attacked to appear. After making up his mind, he immediately raised his finger and tapped on the wall of the cabin. A wave of magic power flowed into it, instantly supporting the entire pleasure boat. Even if the restriction was dissolved, he wouldn't fall to his death. Hugging his zither, he turned into a streak of rainbow light and soared into the sky. However, the direction he went was very different from before. Since the other party attacked me, they should have some confidence. If I go to Mount Li or Yuxiao, there might be an ambush along the way. I might as well find another place. After fleeing for more than 1,000 li, he turned around and looked back. However, he saw that there was always a demon chasing after him. He knew that he had not shaken off the other party. Looking at the other party's skillful movements, it seemed that the other party's movement technique was even above his own. He immediately felt that it was very troublesome. Calculating the distance, no matter which sect he went to, he would have to go to. At this moment, no matter which sect he went to, it would take 6 to 7 days or even half a month. The other party definitely wouldn't give her the chance, so she could only turn back and fight. She decided to choose a place with a wide field of view to fight. This way, not only could she guard against the elusive demon, but she could also guard against cultivators passing by. She could also watch from afar and wait for reinforcements. After traveling for another 3 to 5,000 li, she saw a large river. On the other side was a vast plain. Under the clear sky, there were flocks of white birds flying and hunting by the riverside. It was a suitable place, so she flew above it and stopped. The demon also stopped in front of her. That blurry face actually had a hint of an unfathomable smile. Ming Huaping stood with her zither and said coldly, "Since you want to find me, why don't you attack?" The demon seemed to be provoked by her words. With a cry, it charged forward. She only plucked the zither, and with a boom, it scattered. However, the scattered strands of devil chi trembled and actually turned into hundreds of them. They rushed over again, with the momentum of surrounding her in one fell swoop. Ming Huaping took a step back and instantly turned into a rainbow light, escaping from this place. At the same time, she stretched out her slender hand and made a grabbing motion in midair, using a heaven and earth lock technique. This was not to restrain these demons, but to force out the enemy who was hiding in the dark. However, what shocked her was that not only did this grab not achieve its goal, it couldn't even hold those demons in place. Her reaction was also fast. Seeing that this technique didn't work, she pulled her sleeve and pulled out a ribbon. With a light shake, it immediately spun out several ribbons. Fan Xian was sucked into the ribbons, and in the blink of an eye, it shattered. In the next breath, it returned to its original form, still roaring and rushing over. At this moment, 100 li away, Sima Quan stood on the crown of a large tree, watching the changes of the battle from afar. This time, he borrowed the essence of the Black Pearl, and also took out the demons that he had refined for a long time. Although they couldn't compare to a third-degree cultivator, they won in terms of speed, and could pollute the talisman's spiritual vigor. They also didn't fear the heaven and earth lock technique. If they continued fighting like this, as long as there were no accidents, he had great confidence that he could take down this woman. Ming Huaping sometimes flew and sometimes stopped to fight, but she still couldn't do anything to this demon. After a day and night like this, her mana was obviously running out. At this moment, there was still no one coming to help. Just when she thought that she was going to die here, suddenly there was a strange sound, and a picture scroll flew over from afar. It arrived in the middle of the battle, and the picture scroll opened up. From inside, a Pai Xiu shadow jumped out and roared at the sky. With a bang, all the demons collapsed. Then, a suction force was produced from the picture, and all the scattered devil chi was sucked into it. From afar, a handsome cultivator with a smile on his face came over. He waved his hand and took the picture scroll into his palm, and threw it into his sleeve. He cupped his hands at Ming Huaping and said, I didn't expect to meet junior sister Ming here. Greetings. Sima Quan was extremely shocked, and he secretly shook his head. I didn't expect a disciple of Anata Temple to come here, and with such a high cultivation experience. Forget it, this is fate. Since it doesn't work, I might as well stop now. He also made a decision, and with a shake of his body, he disappeared without a trace. So it's senior apprentice brother Kong? Ming Huaping revealed a surprised expression and bowed. She said gratefully, if it wasn't for senior apprentice brother's help, Huaping would have been harmed by the demon. Kong Shutong smiled lightly and said, it's a small matter, junior sister Ming need not worry. Ming Huaping was confused. Speaking of which, this place is quite far from Aneta Temple. Why is senior apprentice brother Kong here? Kong Shutong said, do you remember the phoenix head pen that I gave you? Ming Huaping nodded and said, of course I remember. This item seems to have the effect of warding off evil and purifying the heart. Huaping has always been carrying it with me. Kong Shutong smiled and said, that's it. That pen has my Anata Temple's restrictive spell on it. If it was tainted by the demonic chi, I would be able to detect it within 1,000 miles. But it's quite a coincidence. I'm here on orders from my sect to sweep away the demonic chi. To be able to bump into you, it can be considered fate. Ming Huaping frowned slightly. What he meant was that he could use the pen to sense where she was. But this time he saved her life, so there was no need to fuss over such a small matter. Moreover, he was magnanimous and admitted to this matter, so she didn't feel that it was inappropriate. Instead, she had a strange feeling in her heart. Kong Shutong looked at her from top to bottom. He suddenly asked, Junior sister Ming, have you been fighting with the demon for a long time? Ming Huaping was surprised and said, it's been a day and night. Is there anything wrong? Kong Shutong said with a serious expression, if I'm not wrong, you have been poisoned by the demonic chi. If you don't try to get rid of it, you might be taken advantage of by the demon. Why don't you come to Aneta Temple and borrow the instrument from our sect to help you get rid of the impurities? Ming Huaping hesitated for a while. Wan Fu said, then I'll have to trouble you. Kong Shutong said, it's all right. The two of them cast their conveyance lights together. 5 days later, they returned to the mountain gate of Aneta Temple. Kong Shutong arranged for Ming Huaping to enter the pavilion. He then traveled to the sky and came to a golden temple below the Yanghua Grotto heaven. When he entered the room, he looked up and saw Zhangzhen standing under a wutong tree that was as tall as 2 people. Her eyes were as clear as water, and there was a faint glow in them. He quickly came up and bowed and said, greetings, senior sister. I've already followed your instructions and brought Taoist Ming back. Zhangzhen said, junior apprentice brother Kong did a good job. You have to think of a way to keep Taoist Ming here. Don't let her return to Mount Li easily. Kong Shutong was stunned, and he could not help but feel a headache. This senior sister did not say so at first. He asked, why did you do this? Zhangzhen turned around and broke a branch and said, the Yuxiao school invited Taoist Ming to enter the mountain to cultivate. Their purpose is to help Taoist Ming enter the grotto heaven, and then return to take back the authority of Mount Li. There must be some other arrangements behind this, but we do not know about it now. However, there is no need to look into it. Since Aneta Temple and Qinsong are working together, there is a high chance that we will go against Yuxiao in the future. We just have to stop this from happening. Kong Shutong cautiously asked, but wouldn't doing so infuriate Sect Master Shen of Mount Li? Zhangzhen said, it does not matter. Zhenren Shen and I have exchanged letters, and she knows about this. You just have to do it. Kong Shutong's heart shook and he thought to himself, no wonder. I thought it was so easy to meet Taoist Ming when I went out this time. This is most likely the arrangement of senior apprentice sister and Sect Master Shen. Thinking about this, he did not dare to look at senior apprentice sister's eyes. He bowed and said, junior apprentice brother will go now. In the hall of Duzhen, Zhang Yan came out from his months of meditation. He looked at the primordial essence stone that was placed in front of him. Compared to before, the stone's luster was slightly dimmer. It was obvious that he had absorbed a lot of the purple clear spiritual qi in the stone. Although there was only one strand of qi, it was unusually pure. With his cultivation, even if he absorbed it into his body, he would still need to slowly refine it. It would take at least 5 to 6 years for it to be used up. If a cultivator was walking outside the virtual sky, it would be enough for a person in the grotto heaven to use for 100 years. However, if one's mana was a level higher, then it would be hard to say. He exercised his technique slightly, and his cultivation experience was indeed much more refined than before. He also realized that the qi could not only help him improve his qi path cultivation experience, but even his corporeal body had some benefits. He couldn't help but think in his heart, thousands of years ago, there were still many strange species in the world that could compete with us. But now, they can't be found anymore. Whether it's the dragon carp liran or the Xingu that fellow Taoist Li subdued in the South Sea, they all stopped at a bottleneck. Perhaps they lack this spiritual opportunity. He looked down again and shook his head slightly. It was a pity that this qi could not be used to refine a talisman. Although the Qinghong sword pill had become a killing weapon, the heaven and earth leaf was still being refined and nourished. He did not know how long it would take for it to be completed. If it was possible, he did not mind increasing the speed. It was just that there was no record of this in the Xian book. Even the talisman and true spirits on him had no reaction to this qi of clear purple. This spiritual opportunity could only be used by the living beings in the world. He waved his hand and took a look at the letter on the table. Seeing that everything was going well in the North Underworld continent and there were no major issues, he went back to meditating. Another month passed like this. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a bell beside his ear. He opened his eyes and asked, "What's the matter outside?" Jingyu entered and said, "Master, Mount Li has sent a disciple to pay a visit to Master." Zhang Yan's thoughts turned. He heard that the chaos in Li Mountain sect was hard to settle, so the disciple came here for this matter. He had previously promised that if Li Mountain sect encountered any difficulties, they could come and ask for help. He said, "Lead her to the outer hall to wait." With a thought, a sword ray flew out from the heart of his brows. In the blink of an eye, it flew out of the small world and into the outer hall. It transformed into an avatar and sat on the praying mat. After a while, a female priest came in. She was dressed in a gray Taoist robe. Although she was beautiful, her expression was stern and hard to get close to. She bowed and said, "Mr. Du Shan's seventh disciple, Hao Yi, greets Jinren Zhang." Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said, "What business does Jinren Hao have here?" Hao Yi finished her greeting and said in a deep voice, "My Li Mountain sect has been in chaos for a long time. However, because we are weak, it has been difficult to settle it. I have come under the orders of the sect master to ask Jinren to send a few great cultivators to help me settle the dispute. If it was just a simple rebellion in the lower sect, Shen Zixin wouldn't have come to ask for help. She could have even asked a few fellow Taoists from the Taoist sects to settle it. However, it was obvious that someone was adding fuel to the fire. She also had some guesses about the person behind the scenes. She believed that her sect was powerless. If this continued, the mountain sect would be in danger of falling apart. In order to quickly stabilize the situation, she didn't hesitate to use a precious favor to beg Qinsong School. Zhang Yan nodded and said, "When Jinren Yuling was still in this world, I once said that I owed her a favor. Since her disciples have come to ask for help, I will naturally help." He told the attendant beside him. Not long after, 2 Taoists came in from outside and bowed. "Greetings, Hall Master." Zhang Yan said, "Take my hall token and go to Li Mountain sect. Help him settle the disobedient disciples. After this is done, you can enter the inner hall to cultivate for 10 years. Both of them were overjoyed. They bowed and said, "Yes, Hall Master." Hao Yi also bowed deeply and said sincerely, "Thank you, Jinren Zhang, for your help. My sect will definitely remember this." She sighed in her heart. The real reason why Li Mountain sect was struggling to cope was because of the lack of foundation in the sect. Shen Zixin had to maintain the stability of the mountain sect all day long. She didn't even have any cultivation skills. If they could be like Qinsong School and could casually send a few Yuanning cultivators who had cultivated Dharmakaya, how could they end up like this? However, she firmly believed that with the foundation laid by Grandmaster Yuling, this situation would definitely change after a few thousand years. Chapter 1087. Ever since the last battle between Donghua and Nanhai, there had been no movement for 2 months as both sides did not reveal any major flaws. Both sides were lying in wait, waiting for an opportunity. 2 months ago, Zhou Ruiying and Wu Yunbi had already activated their mana and gathered the soil of the island under their feet. Then, they sent over a dozen disciples from the southern cliff continent to the island. However, Feng Linghai was not a blessed land. Once the island's mountains and rivers were destroyed, much of the spiritual opportunity was lost. If the two of them wanted to improve their cultivation, they had to find a way to refine the elixir jade. Hence, after some discussion, the two of them would take turns to guard against any sneak attacks from the opposite side. This month, it was Zhou Ruiying's turn to guard. She came out of her meditation and came out of the cloud raft. She stood in the sky and looked down, wanting to see how the formation was being repaired. With this glance, he was a little surprised. In less than 30 days, over 100 altars had actually been erected in this place. It had far exceeded his expectations. If this continued, perhaps this place would return to its original appearance in another 10 days or so. She came to Wu Yunbi's side and asked in confusion, "Why is it being repaired so quickly?" Wu Yunbi did not turn back but only gestured below and said, "With these demons, it's much faster." Zhou Ruiying followed her gaze and saw many strange demons below. They looked like rhinoceroses and elephants, with huge heads and bodies. Their roars were like thunder, but their bodies were full of rocks and soil. They were struggling to move under the whipping of many cultivators. For the first time, there were several dozen metamorphosis stage demonic cultivators, and just one of them was able to easily lift up a stone plate that was used to stabilize the formation base. From the looks of it, with the combined power of several of them, they would be able to lift up a formation altar. She asked curiously, "Where did these demon cultivators come from?" Wu Yunbi said, "Junior sister, have you forgotten? Qinsong School is leading various sects to attack the North Underworld. Many demon clans were defeated and many defectors sent captives who refused to obey to the celestial market to exchange for precious materials and elixirs. I am lacking people here, so I asked for permission from the sect. They were sent here." When Zhou Ruiying heard this, he revealed a mocking expression and said, "The Qinsong School probably didn't expect that his attack on the North Underworld would actually help me." Wu Yunbi said indifferently, "How could Qinsong School not think of it? It's just that they don't really care. After all, Tao Zhenhong, Mi Xuanan, and the others are not his Qinsong's people. Besides, my Yuxiao school also needs to exchange spirit shells and precious materials. Most of these will still fall into the hands of the Qinsong school, so they are not at a disadvantage." Zhou Ruiying snorted and said, "Are you just going to watch the Qinsong school attack the North Underworld? I'm afraid their intentions this time are not so simple. If that place is pacified, the other generation will have no more restraints." Wu Yunbi shook her head and said, "How can it be that easy? Even though the Qinsong school has 13 grotto heavens, it's still not enough. There are still 4 demon marquises guarding it. Unless they are willing to destroy the continent, it will be hard to break through." Zhou Ruiying said hatefully, "If the sect is willing to put in the effort to pacify the South Sea first, would the Qinsong school be so assured to attack the North Underworld demon tribe?" Wu Yunbi didn't reply. The cultivators in the sect were all focused on cultivation to deal with the upcoming disaster. As long as it didn't involve the foundation, such a thing that would damage one's cultivation, this was something that they would never do. Whether it was right or wrong to do so, there was no point arguing about it now. They could only see who would be the real winner in the end. As the two of them were talking, a golden light suddenly flew over from the north. Zhou Ruiying glanced over and saw that it was a flying letter. The rainbow turned. With a thought, it flew into her hand. When she opened it, her face darkened. The letter stated that Huaping had been summoned back to the mountain gate by Shen Zixin. However, she was attacked along the way, and her whereabouts were unknown. She was annoyed that Zhou Junyi is really useless. He can't even keep an eye on his own Dao companion. I spent so much effort on him and didn't hear anything about her whereabouts. I definitely didn't investigate carefully. Originally, the matter in the South Sea had already taken up most of her energy. Now that there was another matter, it really gave her a headache. I have planned for this for a long time and reported it to the sect. I can't give up halfway. She immediately found a disciple and said, "Go to the sect and tell Zhou Junyi that he needs to investigate Ming Huaping's matter thoroughly. I don't care what he does, he must bring her back. If he can't, he can forget about cultivating in the sect. Within 100 years, go to the South Cliff continent and exterminate the poisonous insects." The disciple didn't dare to ask any more. He lowered his head and bowed before leaving in a hurry. Qinsong School, deep within the small world of the upper extreme hall, on the originally silent continent, waves of strange sounds suddenly came out. It was like a turbulent river, water and rocks colliding. The sound was so clear that all living beings in the small world could hear it clearly. As the sound grew louder and louder, it became more and more high-pitched. It was as if thousands of cranes were flapping their wings and crying. In the end, it couldn't be covered anymore. It caused the mountains to shake and the Great Lake to surge. In a flash, there was a rumbling sound. A golden white river rushed out and floated in midair. At that moment, the wind and clouds fluctuated. The golden light was unusually bright. It lingered on the rainbows and rode on the colorful clouds. For a moment, the sky was dim and the qi was clear. After a long time, the qi spun and descended from the heavens. It had the power to flatten the continent and overturn the mountains and rivers. When it reached the peak of a mountain, it suddenly flashed and the thousands of strange phenomena were all retracted. Lu Junyang was dressed in plain clothes. He stood on the peak and looked down at the surging river. He muttered with his hands behind his back, "Alone on the peak of the 10,000 mountains, alone on the great Dao Bell. 1,000 waves can't stop it." I look at the rushing clouds calmly. Wiping the stubborn heart with the corner of my clothes, the dust falls to reveal my true face. Let the wind, thunder, rain, and cranes fly among the 9 clouds. After a while, he sat down and carefully comprehended the various changes after achieving the grotto heaven. Soon the night passed. A boy came from afar and carefully came to his side. He bowed and said, "Sage Lu, Sage Qi invites you." Lu Junyang said, "Got it?" The boy clasped his hands and left. Lu Junyang sat quietly for a moment. He stood up and turned into a ray of light. He flew into the sky and reached the high heavens of this small world. He landed in front of a big hall and walked in. He looked around and saw Qi Yuntian, Zhang Yan, and Huxian sitting on the platform. He bowed and said, "Greetings to the 3 hall masters." Qi Yuntian raised his hand and said, "Sage Lu, please sit." Lu Junyang thanked him and sat on the futon at the side. Qi Yuntian said, "Sage Lu, now that you have formed a cave, you can be the guardian elder of the main hall of the upper extreme hall. However, ever since I became the head of the sect, I have never given anything without merit. Does Sage Lu have a different opinion?" Lu Junyang was Yan Shangxing's disciple after all. Previously, he was only a guardian in the side hall. However, as the guardian of the main hall, in order to avoid criticism in the sect, he had to have some merit. Just like Huxian, he had to personally go to Dongsheng continent to eliminate demons on the day of the Grotto Heaven Hall. Lu Junyang said calmly, "The sect has orders. I will obey. May I ask Sage Qi, where should I go?" Qi Yuntian said, "Our sect is on an expedition to North Darkstar continent. However, there are 4 demon marquises guarding the Lord Origin Palace. If they don't come out, we can only wander around the land we occupy. I would like to ask Sage Lu to take charge, just in case." Huxian said, "Sage Lu, if you have any difficulties, you can tell me here." Lu Junyang thought for a while and said, "There is no difficulty." Qi Yuntian turned to look at Zhang Yan and asked, Does Hall Master Duzhen have something to say? Zhang Yan said, since Sage Lu is going to take charge of North Darkstar, why don't we send an invitation in the name of Qin Song and challenge him to a battle? If I lose, I will leave North Darkstar. If the enemy loses, he will not be in charge of the continent's affairs. What do you think? Huoxian said, he might not agree. Zhang Yan smiled faintly, if he doesn't dare to agree. The morale of the demon cultivator clans must have plummeted, and their morale must have suffered a setback. This will be even more beneficial to our actions. Taoist Master Lu, can you take it? Lu Junyang cupped his hands and said, yes. Qi Yuntian said, then it's settled. Taoist Master Lu, if you need any treasure, you can tell the three of us. Qinsong School had many treasures that were enshrined in the treasure room. As long as the 3 hall masters or the sect master allowed it, they could use it. It was just that they had to return to the sect afterward. Lu Junyang stood up and said, I already know what the sect master wants. I need to go back and recuperate. I will leave in 10 days at the latest. After that, he bowed again and turned to leave the hall. Huoxian said in a deep voice, there are 4 demon marquises in Lady Origin's palace. If all of them come out, Sage Lu might not be able to handle them. Zhang Yan smiled and said, my Qinsong school disciples have been on expeditions for months and have wiped out more than 100 demon tribes. The 4 demon marquises did not dare to show themselves. They are already very afraid of me. Even if they were to fight, at most 1 or 2 of them will come. If the 4 of them come out at the same time, are you not afraid that my Qinsong school will kill them all? Qi Yuntian said, the demon cultivators of North Darkstar could borrow the power of Yuxiao in the past. However, it was restricted by the South Sea Formation and could not attack the North at full force. However, we still need to be careful. Can junior brother Zhang ask fellow Tao and the other 2 to attack with full force for once? Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said, we can only do our best. He had never interfered in the affairs of South Sea. Whether he could do it this time or not, it would depend on the specific situation. If he forced it, it would only mess up the overall situation. Qi Yuntian also knew this and said, then I can only ask junior brother to put in more effort on this matter. Zhang Yan nodded and agreed. In the North Darkstar continent, the Qinsong disciples had already set up a formation on the snake-slaying cliff. In the center, there was a 9-story tower. On top of the tower, there was a ball of Huanyang fire. It burned fiercely and lit up the surroundings. Within 1,000 miles, there was no difference between day and night. This fire could not only drive away the evil aura, but it could also intimidate the demons and make it difficult for them to invade. Feng Ming stood at a high place and looked across. He was now the chancellor of the Qinzheng school and someone who had cultivated the Yuanying Dharmakaya. He was one of the 3 third-degree cultivators in charge of this place. Thousands of miles away was the location of Tsang River. On the opposite side of the river, there were already 300 demon tribes of various sizes. Under the night sky, there seemed to be no end to them. Footsteps could be heard behind him. Xie Zongyan came to his side and said, Chancellor Feng, what are you looking at? Feng Ming said, I heard that there are more demon tribes rushing over from all directions. It will not be easy for the disciples to cross the river in a short period of time. Xie Zongyan said calmly, so what if there are more? The outcome of this battle will be decided by us. At this moment, a voice was heard. I heard that the number of rank 4 cultivators on the other side has increased to 4. In terms of battle strength, they are already slightly superior to our Qinsong. Fellow Taoists, you too must not underestimate them. The 2 turned around and saw a middle-aged Taoist wearing a black robe and a black crown walking over with a solemn expression. They cupped their fists and said, Reverend Song. This Reverend Song was the vice-chancellor of the Purple Light Courtyard, one of the 9 courtyards. He was very particular about etiquette, and his words and actions were strictly adhered to. He was not likable at all, so the 2 of them avoided talking to him as much as possible. However, he seemed to be unaware of it and returned the greeting with a solemn expression. He said, previously, Wudu tribe's leader Fu Luan attacked the foot of Shou Sui Mountain when I was unprepared. Although he was chased away in the end, I'm sure both of you have witnessed this demon's strength. If the remaining 3 demons are not weaker than him, we will have a 50-50 chance of victory in a battle. For the sake of our disciples' lives, this courtyard wishes to petition the 3rd High Hall to send more people. What do you 2 reverends think? Xie Zongyuan and Feng Ming looked at each other. Xie Zongyuan was the first to speak. Vice-Chancellor Song's words are also prudent. However, last time, it was not a real battle. When I was sweeping through the tribe and met with any difficulties, I called for help from the mountain gate. I'm afraid that all of you reverends will think that I'm a coward. Reverend Song said seriously, we are here to protect our disciples and ensure that they are not harmed. What is a mere personal honor? Feng Ming said, just as Vice-Chancellor Song said, there are 4 people on the other side with the same level of cultivation as me. If they attack separately, the 3 of us will not be able to protect them. However, there is a solution, and we don't have to ask for help from the mountain gate. Reverend Song cupped his hands and said, Reverend Feng, I'm all ears if you have any brilliant ideas. Feng Ming said, as long as we can kill 1 or 2 big demons within these 2 days, our predicament will be resolved. We won't have to worry about what they'll set up later. Reverend Song did not expect him to say that. He was stunned for a moment, but he did not immediately object. He only pondered whether it was possible. Xie Zongyuan smiled and looked at Reverend Song. He said, Chancellor Feng is very courageous. I'm willing to go with you. Reverend Song thought for a while and asked solemnly, is Chancellor Feng a spur-of-the-moment idea, or have you thought about it deeply? Feng Ming said, what's the difference? Apart from the 4 great demons, who else is a match for us? Now that the enemy has yet to gather, we can kill our way over. They won't dare to abandon their subordinates and escape. If we do it well, we might be able to defeat them in one fell swoop. If Reverend Song doesn't dare to do it, you can wait here and protect the disciples. Reverend Song said expressionlessly, Chancellor Feng, don't provoke me. If it's feasible, I will go. If it's not feasible, I will risk my life to dissuade you. Feng Ming stared at him and said, then Reverend Song, what do you think? Song Jinren shook his head and said, this plan is not feasible, but it is too risky. We still have to plan properly. It is more appropriate to have 1 more person. When I go to the School of Books and have the results, we will make a decision. Feng Ming said, Reverend's worries are not without reason. However, it will take at least 4 or 5 days for the sect to send people over. The longer we delay, the more variables there will be. It's better for me to take the initiative to attack rather than passively deal with them. Moreover, if even Reverend Song thinks it's inappropriate, then the other side of the demon division will not think of it. We can catch them off guard. I ask Reverend Song to protect the disciples here. I will go with fellow Xie to the other side of the river. Reverend Song's expression finally changed. He shouted, no. Feng Ming ignored him. Instead, he leaped up, summoning a sword light and flying toward Song Shui. Xie Zongyuan laughed, waved his sleeve, and stepped into the air. Reverend Song frowned, hesitated for a moment, and said, if these 2 people are lost, it will be difficult for me to support them alone. It's better to kill our way over first. They may not know the truth of my situation, but I hope they can be like Reverend Feng and succeed in one fell swoop. He also tapped his foot and leaped into the air. Floating astronomy. Chapter 1088. Feng Ming and Xie Zongyuan traversed thousands of miles and quickly arrived at the banks of the Tsang River. The 2 of them stopped and looked over. The waves were turbulent here and the river was more than 10 miles wide. Standing on the high ground, they could clearly see the layout of every camp on the other side. However, the Qinsong school disciples had come here several times to investigate. As long as they didn't cross the river, the demon cultivators didn't pay much attention. Xie Zongyuan looked back and said, Vice-Chancellor Song is here too. Feng Ming said, that's good. With 1 more person, we have a higher chance of success. Xie Zongyuan smiled and said, in that case, not a single one of the disciples is left. Isn't Chancellor Feng afraid of unforeseen events? Feng Ming said casually, What unforeseen events can there be? Did Jinren Xie forget that other than our Qinsong cultivators, there are also the old demons from Yuan tribe? With their strength, they can protect the snake-beheading cliff. It's just that Vice-Chancellor Song doesn't trust them. Xie Zongyuan said, those who are not of our tribe have different intentions. It's not wrong for Vice-Chancellor Song to think so. Feng Ming said, Yuan tribe's current power is all thanks to our Qinsong school. We also put in a lot of effort to investigate earlier. Moreover, the elders and nephews of the tribe have all joined the Yaoyin clan. Jinren Wei is Jinren Zhang's disciple. Do we have to worry about him rebelling? Xie Zongyun thought about it and admitted, that's true. With our Qinsong's power, we are far stronger than the Dark North tribe. It's impossible for them to join the Lord Yuan Palace. The two of them had just spoken a few words when a beam of light appeared in front of them. The light dissipated and Jinren Song appeared. Feng Ming smiled and said, Vice-Chancellor Song, since you're here, you must agree with my decision? Jinren Song said solemnly, Chancellor Feng, I will report your actions to the sect. I was unable to advise you in time. If the sect blames me, I will bear the responsibility with you too. However, since I'm here, I will first help you get rid of the enemy in front of us. Feng Ming laughed and said, then we'll talk about it after the battle. The three of them stopped talking. All of them gathered their powers, crossed the water and broke into the camp of the demon clan. They ignored the guards and went straight to the camp of the demon clan. Not long after, they arrived at the boundary. Feng Ming saw that there was a crude restriction array here and he didn't even think about it. With a flick of his hand, he tossed out a dozen lightning beads, instantly shattering the formation plate. At the same time, he took out his sword pellet and slashed in. On the other hand, Xie Zongyuan withdrew a copper pot and poured it down, causing a jade-white stream of water to gush out with a torrential momentum. Like a mountain torrent, it not only destroyed the entire tent. At the same time, he threw out dozens of array flags in all directions, sealing all the places that the water touched within. Once this formation was formed, for a short period of time, there was no need to worry about anyone barging in from the outside, and they could easily deal with their opponents. Just as Feng Ming expected, the demon cultivator in the tent did not expect that Qinsong School would choose this time to attack. An angry roar came from below, and astral winds surged in all directions. From the black wind and mist, an extremely sturdy man wearing a helmet and armor rushed out. He had a firm expression. His eyes shone brightly, and he had a thick beard that almost covered his chest. Feng Ming and the other two became spirited. They recognized this person as Demon King Fu Luan, the leader of Wudu tribe. He had already cultivated to the 4th transformation perfection realm, and if he was eliminated in one fell swoop, there was no need to fear the remaining demons. After Fu Luan rushed out of the tent in anger, he saw 3 nascent soul cultivators standing in the sky. He couldn't help but be startled. At this moment he felt a sword light flash above him. He quickly lowered his head, but he heard a clanging sound. Although he dodged, half of his helmet and the bun on top of his head were cut off. His hair was disheveled and he was in a sorry state. The sword light was still unwilling to let him go. It spun in the air and attacked again. Fu Luan immediately took out a copper hammer and blocked it. With a clang, the sword light was knocked away, but a shallow sword mark was left on the surface of the hammer. He glanced to the side and saw that his house was surrounded by the formation flags. Looking at the situation, he knew that the other party wanted to kill him. He wanted to leave this place first, so he raised the sledgehammer in front of him and let the sword light cut his body several times. A series of sparks flew, but it couldn't break through his strong armor. He squatted down slightly and leaped into the air. Just now, Daoist Song had not made a move, but when he saw Fu Luan coming up, he took out his horsetail whisk and swept it. Strands of cloud silk floated down like cotton. Fu Luan did not care about them and wanted to use his sturdy armor to break out. However, when he came into contact with them, he found that he had fallen into a spider's web, and it was difficult for him to break free. Seeing more and more of them, he roared and tried to break free. However, at this moment, Xie Zongyuan pointed with both hands and a silver ball shot out. It was extremely fast and hit the bridge of Fu Luan's nose, causing blood to splatter. Fu Luan could not help but let out a muffled groan, and his body leaned back. However, his mana was slightly stabilized, and his injuries were immediately healed. However, it was only a short delay, and the cloud silk had already covered his entire body. He suddenly felt that his body was extremely heavy, as if he was carrying a small mountain on his back. He could not help but fall down, and was actually forced back to the ground. At this moment, the sword light attacked again, surrounding him and slashing randomly. Fu Luan had no choice but to use the hammer to block left and right. He only focused on protecting his head and ignored the attacks that landed on his body. However, because the cloud silk on his body was heavy, there were a few times when he wanted to soar into the sky, but he was hit back down. Even though he was strong, he could only defend at this moment. Although it was the first time that Feng Ming and the other two worked together, they had a tacit understanding. They knew that their opponent's skin was thick, and it would be difficult to kill him in an instant. Therefore, they first tried to restrict him to the ground, so they could calmly attack from the sky. Taoist Song saw that the situation had stabilized and said, "Fellow Taoists, hold him back." He took out the sword from his waist and used his mana to guide it into the sky. However, he did not attack the enemy, but he kept absorbing the spiritual vigor from all directions. This was a famous magic weapon in the Purple Light Courtyard, called the Great Ceremony and Sorrow Sword. When it was used, light shone in all directions, but it still could not hurt people. It had to slowly accumulate spiritual vigor, and when its sharpness was at its peak, it was only a little bit weaker than a real weapon. Fu Luan looked at the sword light that was hanging high up in the sky. He could feel that the momentum was getting stronger and stronger. He could imagine how powerful the slash would be, and he could not help but feel a sense of danger. He knew that he had to find a way to stop it, so he took advantage of just now. He had already accumulated a lot of mana, so he took a deep breath and shouted. This shout was like the roar of a tiger or a dragon. Feng Ming and Xie Zongyun suddenly felt that the spiritual vigor around them was in a mess, and the originally continuous attacks were suddenly messed up. Fu Luan took the opportunity. He shouted again, and his body instantly grew to a height of 10 feet. The cloud threads that entangled his body also broke off one by one. He raised the copper hammer in his hand and hit the sword that was hanging in the sky. Feng Ming saw this and took out a flag. He held the long pole with one hand and shook it. In an instant, the ground shook, and even the water in the distance was stirred up. Fu Luan suddenly lost his balance, and his hammer naturally missed. Xie Zongyun waved his sleeves and threw a talisman, which landed on Fu Luan's back. The latter felt like something was suppressing his body. In just a few breaths, his body continued to shrink and he actually returned to his original appearance. Xie Zongyuan said, "Fellow Taoists, quickly attack. My sword light can only suppress him for half a minute." Feng Ming said loudly, "That's enough." The commotion here had already alarmed all the demon divisions. In less than half a minute, in just 100 breaths, the other 3 demon kings would come to help, so they had to kill him within this time. Taoist Song pointed at the sword that was hanging in the sky, and there was a flash of light. It slashed down. Fu Luan was shocked, and he raised the copper hammer in his hand to block. Who knew that the sword light was extremely sharp, and when it slashed down, there was a poochie sound. The sledgehammer was cut in half. Not only that, a small part of his body, along with an arm and a leg, was chopped off. The great demon let out a pained howl and fell into the turbulent waves. Under the joint attack of 3 great cultivators who had cultivated the Yuanying Dharma body, this famous demon king seemed to be unable to fight back. It wasn't that he was weak, but that he had too few magic treasures on him, and the methods that Feng Ming and the others used were all restraining him. He could only rely on his strong body and hard armor to bitterly resist. But if any one of the 3 were to fight against him, they definitely wouldn't be able to defeat him so easily. But even at this moment, the expressions of Feng Ming and the others didn't relax. This kind of injury would have killed a normal person, but the other party was a demon king. As long as his magic power wasn't exhausted, and no one paid attention to him, he would be able to regrow his limbs in a few breaths. So the three of them attacked at the same time, and the magic treasures and lightning beads attacked together, wanting to kill him in one fell swoop. Fu Wan's eyes became incomparably red. He knew that if he hesitated, he would die here. How could he be willing to give up? With a loud shout, he opened his mouth and spat out a cloud of black smoke. There seemed to be thin blood threads spiraling within it, and it actually stopped all the things that were attacking him. But after doing this, his originally full and sturdy body shriveled up a lot, and the divine light in his eyes dimmed a little. Xie Zongyuan recognized that this was a mouthful of magic power essence that Fu Wan had cultivated himself. Once he used it, his vitality would be greatly damaged and his lifespan would be reduced. He could see that Fu Wan was already risking his life. Just as he was about to add more force, he heard a rumble and the formation flags all shook. At the same time, the silvery white water that had soaked half of the flagpole also decreased a little. He was shocked and said, "There's a demon king rushing over from outside. This formation can only last for a few dozen breaths at most. The two of you quickly act." When Fu Wan heard this, it was as if he had seen a life-saving straw. He desperately activated his blood essence and magic power without caring about anything else. Feng Ming pondered for a while, then said, "I'll leave this to the two of you. I'll go meet the people outside." He turned around and went out of the formation. He saw a demon cultivator with long hair on his face, long arms, and short legs standing outside. This person only wore a green robe and a long belt was tied around his waist, which was casually knotted. He held a wolf-tooth mace with both hands and was constantly smashing the formation. Seeing him come out, he suddenly jumped back, and a white light shot out from his hand. Feng Ming didn't know what was going on, so he didn't dare to use his protective light to block it. He dodged, but at this moment, the demon cultivator jumped forward again, and actually jumped close to him. The wolf-tooth mace smashed down with a fierce wind. Feng Ming was about to dodge again, but he suddenly felt as if his body was being pulled by a strong wind, and he couldn't move. He knew that he had fallen into the trap of a strength path cultivator's magic power. Just now, the three of them were fighting with Fu Wan, and they had been trying to avoid such a situation. They didn't expect this opponent to be so cunning, and they fell into it when they weren't paying attention. However, he didn't panic. He waved the flag in his left hand, and the demon cultivator heard a loud sound next to his ears. He felt the world spin, and his mace naturally hit nothing. Feng Ming guided with his mind, and a sword light slashed out. The demon cultivator didn't have time to dodge, but he wasn't wearing armor, so his body was extremely nimble. He actually tilted his shoulder at the last moment, and only a small wound appeared, but it healed in the blink of an eye. While he was dodging, Feng Ming stretched out his hand again, and used a heaven and earth lock technique. This technique wasn't very useful against strength path cultivators, and they could escape with just a light struggle. However, the demon cultivator just now dodged the sword light, so he couldn't help but pause. In just a breath's time, Feng Ming waved his sleeve, and released a golden net, which covered the demon cultivator's head. The demon cultivator instantly felt that something was wrong, and he didn't dare to touch the net at all. He actually threw away the divine weapon in his hand, and then he curled his body into a ball, and suddenly turned into a wisp of white smoke. He wanted to crawl out of the hole in the large net. Feng Ming sneered, and the flag in his hand waved again. With a rumble, the surrounding scenery seemed to be turned upside down, and the demon cultivator immediately fell out of the white smoke. The golden net just happened to fall, and it trapped him firmly. Feng Ming took out a spell, and the net suddenly retracted. Where it came into contact with the demon cultivator's body, the sound of metal rubbing against metal could be heard, but the demon cultivator wasn't hurt at all, and he was still struggling inside. He was also secretly surprised, but the golden net was used by Elder Sun in the past, and he had once used it to strangle a demon king to death. He didn't expect that he couldn't take care of the demon cultivator in a short time. Just as he was about to use his magic power again, the demon cultivator spoke at this moment. "I'm Ape Tribe's Demon General Li Su. I know the rules of your Qinsong school, and if you kill me, How much merit do you get? But if you're willing to let me go, I'm willing to swear an oath to help you kill the other two. Feng Ming asked, The other two? The demonic cultivator sneered and said, Since you're here, you must have already inquired about the situation in my camp. Why bother asking? Then he closed his eyes and said, Life or death, you can decide it with a word. Feng Ming made some calculations. Right now, among the tribes of Northern Dark, Ape Tribe was the strongest. This demon cultivator was rank 4 after all. He must know a lot of information and he seemed to be tactful. It was useful to let him live. Inspiration surged beside him. Xie Zongyuan and Reverend Song came out. He turned around and asked, How is it? Xie Zongyuan said, Fu Luan has already been beheaded. At this moment, the three of them seemed to have sensed something and looked up into the sky. They saw 2 more demonic cultivators coming from afar, but they realized that they seemed to have arrived a step too late, so they held their divine weapons and stood in the air with extremely vigilant expressions. They looked at the 3 of them from over 5 kilometers away and did not come over. Reverend Song saw that the 2 wanted to fight. He quickly said, You 2 have already achieved your goal tonight. This expedition to Qinsong is also to temper your disciples. If we kill all the great demons, all the tribes will definitely scatter, and it will be even harder to kill them. Moreover, we have expended a lot of magic power. If we continue fighting, we will not be able to defend against any changes. It is better to stop while we're ahead. Feng Ming said, Let's do as Vice Dean Song says. He lifted the demon cultivator in the net and rode astral winds, slowly retreating towards Snake-Slaying Cliff with Song and Xie Zongyu. Not long later, the 3 of them vanished into the night. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.